streaming. Like, you have to do so much like prep work to get YouTube in a place where it actually looks halfway decent. So as far as I can tell, Facebook is currently live, YouTube is currently live, and Tangled is currently live. So we should be everywhere where we need to be at. It reads the chat for you. Yeah, but everybody's voice is random and everybody's voice just comes out like however. And then plus it kind of interrupts the stream. So I can see how it can be useful in some cases, but I think it should be a paid feature myself. I think that if people want to use that to talk to the streamer, they should be paying like how we pay on YouTube for like super chats. I think that it would be worth um 25,000 millics of a voice chat option where you have a certain amount of characters that you can put into it. I do appreciate Crank. I do believe it was Crank who did it. So I do appreciate Crank for implementing new ideas into Tangled because this is how we stay fresh and we provide excellent quality to our users by staying on top of things. But I personally don't plan on using that unless people are paying to be put on stream. Oh, Facebook is not live yet. So we're gonna go live on Facebook right now. Go live. Yeah, that's just because thank you, BP Tyson. That's just because how things are, it's already easy AF to get distracted and thrown off course when it comes to your streams on Tangled. Just because of how wild and unregulated everything is. Car was have. What an interesting name. Hello and welcome. There's gonna be a few things that we do today, but here's this. This is this one. Let's go back to Tangled. So Renaissance Fairy put up a new post on the Neogenian, the G Neogenian on Tangled. So we'll probably be trying to read some of that. And I do apologize because I have a slight cold. And I'm debating on if I should just turn the fan off. But I do have the heat running right now. So I don't know if I will be able to stay clear and warm enough throughout the stream so that I don't feel like to constantly blow my nose because I will definitely cover the camera from that. And then I just want to share that I am live on Facebook so that people don't say that I didn't tell them. I also need to check to make sure that I look okay. So, how have you guys been doing? How's your days been going? Tell me about yourself. It's been a kind of rough week for me. Crank's wooden oven. Yeah, it was fresh out of Crank's wood oven. You're absolutely right. Ooh, it is rough today. So on Tangled, there's a lot of people who are currently live. Let's see. So just today alone, we have G1 Up. I don't know who that is. Let's see who this is from 3 hours ago. And it's subscribers only. Who is this? Nomad that enjoys nostalgia arcade games. It was their first live stream, and it was for subscribers only. I will have to come back to that because I don't know who that is. And then Crank was live 2 hours ago, but they just ended, I guess. 17:18:56. Yep, so Crank just ended his stream. And then Maya, I do believe, just started his stream about an hour ago, it says. So these are all the places that are currently streaming. And he's been live for about an hour and a half. So I would say, if you want to go support them, go say hello. And we will start this stream very soon. Okay, now that I can see that everything is working properly, comments, settings, default followers. Okay, so thank you everyone for working with me. If you guys want to share with me how your day is going, I would greatly appreciate it, as I am finally getting everything up and running. So I guess the only people who are live right now are me and Maya. And Maya is awesome, so don't forget to go over there and support him when you have a chance. Let's go to the Neopaginian page. So today, okay, I'd like to engage a bit before I wash my clothes. Thanks, Puzzle Rush. Okay, so it's only been 2 hours since we started the stream. I'm sure people don't mind too much that it's not where it's supposed to be. Let's see, where should I start? Hey, Renaissance, thanks for coming to hang out. I appreciate that. So, if I wanted to, okay. We're gonna start in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hello and welcome everyone. I am Sinfully Cerebral, coming to you live from Tangled, Facebook and YouTube. Today's topic will be on Michael Levin, and this is Unfolding New Paradigms of Posthuman Intelligence. It was an interview done with The Trajectory. He is someone I have not watched before, but I thought that this was a very interesting and very powerful interview. So I do want to make sure that we have time to go through the whole thing because it's an hour long. So I'm not sure if I'm going to watch the video on 1.25 times to try and get through it quickly, but there are things that I definitely want us to talk about when it comes to this. Okay, so just a reminder to not forget to hit the like, share, and subscribe buttons. In the description of this video, you can find my link tree with an easy outline of all my social medias, where to sign up, and easy ways to support. And I'd like to give a shout out to all my Neogenian supporters: Renaissance Fairy, This Neogenian Life, Art Prompter, Vibrational, Heretical Response, and Exploring the Holos recently talked about us in their own latest YouTube post, so thank you. I also want to give a shout out to all of my biggest Tangled supporters from the month of February, which were Jonathan Hernandez, Maya, Time Fungus, Aerosol, Vibrational, Price, and Danny. So thank you guys so much for all your support. And without further ado, we are going to open up the stream talking about Renaissance Fairy's latest post on Tangled. If I sound a little congested, I do apologize. I am in between states when it comes to my health right now. So if you see me cut out for a moment, just give me a second to blow my nose, okay? Because it is unsightly to do that on camera. So I do appreciate you guys' patience with me trying to get through this today. So let's just look at the comments really quick. We have Renaissance Fairy, Puzzle Rush, Floral, BP Tyson, Car Waspav, Rocco, Ramona, Hamzakazi, Bevs, and a slew of other people, Shohana. So, Puzzle Rush was just saying that I was reading your posts and I'm still in the middle of my reading. We'll try to finish it later. And that comment goes to Renaissance Fairy. The Carl Jung? Yes, the Carl Jung post is what he was talking about, Renaissance Fairy. He specifically was talking about that in the beginning of the chat. So today's gonna be a kind of heavy video, I'm not gonna lie. So I hope you guys are ready to get into these topics. Okay? And we gotta figure out if I should just turn my phone off or not. And Rocco, what was that 1 Millix tip? What did you 1 Millix tip me, Rocco? Where? Let me see where that was at. Where did that go? Oh, to my stream. Gosh. Some people are psychopaths. It's okay. We still love them anyway. Yeah, so I think I'm going to... Okay, everything seems to be working up and running. Start here. Rocco always tips 1 Millix is what Rocco says. Thank you, Rocco, for talking about yourself in the third person. So this post was put up 52 minutes ago. It's already earned 15,000 Millix. So let's see if we can give this a tip at the end. Ready? It says, understanding Jung's theory of psychic energy and its social implications. Carl Jung's theories on personality have profoundly impacted how we understand individual differences, especially regarding the flow of psychic energy. At the heart of his work is the idea that our inner energies shape not only who we are, but also how we interact with the world around us. This article explores the relationship between Jung's concept of psychic energy and the common assumption that these energies dictate our approach to society. The foundations of Jung's personality theory, which is the title here. Jung proposed that every individual possesses a natural orientation for directing psychic energy. This orientation typically manifests as either extroversion or introversion. Extroverts, these individuals direct their energy outward, engaging with the external world through social interactions, activities, and relationships. And enthusiastic and expressive engagement with life often characterizes their behavior. Introverts, in contrast, focus their energy inwards, drawing strength and insight from their internal thoughts, reflections, and emotions. Their engagement with the world is often more subdued and reflective. This dichotomy lays the groundwork for understanding how different personality types might approach various aspects of life, including their social interactions. Inverted personal types, a dynamic adaptation. Jung also introduced the idea of inverted personal types, a concept that refers to individuals who, for various reasons, exhibit traits that appear contrary to their natural energy orientation. For instance, an individual with an innate introverted nature might adopt extroverted behaviors when facing social pressures or during specific developmental stages, like growing up. Conversely, an extrovert might retreat inward when confronted with challenging situations or overwhelming external demands. This inversion isn't random. It represents a dynamic process where the individual compensates for perceived imbalances. It reflects the complexity of personality, showing that the energy flow within each person can be fluid and adaptive rather than fixed. The social lens. Why energy orientation is seen as a way of dealing with society. The observable behaviors of extroverts and introverts have led to the common assumption that the direction of one's psychic energy is synonymous with how one deals with society. Several factors contribute to this viewpoint. Visibility of social interactions. Okay. I feel like sometimes these kind of end off on a a cliff. I thought it was going to continue. So the social lenses, why energy orientations is seen as a way of dealing with society. The observable behaviors of extroverts and introverts have led to the common assumption that the direction of one's psychic energy is synonymous with how one deals with society. Several factors contribute to this viewpoint. These are the several factors. Visibility of social interactions, cultural emphasis of sociability, adaptation and compensatory behavior, and psychological development needs. So let's start with this visibility of social interaction. Extroverted behaviors, being talkative, expressive, and outgoing, are immediately noticeable in social settings. These traits naturally align with society's expectation of active participation and engagement, reinforcing that energy orientation is directly linked to social behaviors. Okay, it's reinforcing that energy orientation. This is one sentence is directly linked to social behaviors. The cultural emphasis on social ability. Many cultures place a high value on social interaction and assertiveness. When individuals naturally exhibit these traits, it is often interpreted as reflecting their personality's energy direction. The more reserved nature of introverts, on the other hand, might be seen as a lesser engagement with society. The more reserved nature of introverts, on the other hand, might be seen as a lesser engagement with society, even though it represents a different but equally valid way of interacting with society. Thank you for joining us, Spookadelics. Adaptation and compensatory behavior. Inverted personal types show us that the relationship between psychic energy and social behavior is not one-dimensional. When an introvert acts extrovertedly or vice versa, it is often a response to environmental demands rather than an actual change in their underlying nature. However, this adaptive behavior further blurs the lines, prompting observers to equate these shifts with an individual overall social strategy. Psychology and developmental needs. Young believe that individuals might alter their behavior to achieve balance. When a person's natural energy flow is suppressed or overstimulated, adapting an opposite behavior can be a way to restore equilibrium. Society becomes a stage where these internal processes are enacted. I was thinking about ambivert as well, and the observable behavior is taken as direct reflection of inner dynamics. Beyond social behavior, the broader implications. While Jung's theory provides a valuable framework for understanding the interplay between inner energies and outer behaviors, it's important to remember that personality is multifaceted. The assumption that energy orientation is solely about dealing with society simplifies a more complex picture. Personalities encompass an intricate web of unconscious processes, developmental experiences, and environmental interactions that shape how we engage with the world. Furthermore, recognizing the fluidity in personality, as seen in the concept of inverted types, reminds us that human behavior is not static, it's dynamic. People continually negotiate their internal drives with external expectations, leading to a dynamic interplay that can evolve. Conclusion. Jung's insights into psychic energy offer a compelling lens through which to view personality. The natural orientation of extroversion and introversion provide a foundation for understanding why individuals behave the way they do in social context. However, inverted personal types and the complex adaptive process at play reveal that our approach to society is far from one-dimensional. By acknowledging the multifaceted nature of personality, we can better appreciate that while psychic energy does influence how we deal with society, it also reflects deeper ongoing internal processes. Ultimately, Jung's work invites us to explore the rich tapestry of human behavior where inner energies and social interactions are in constant dynamic dialogue. So my voice is shot. Thanks, Renaissance Fairy, for still being here. So we have Renaissance Fairy in the Tangled chat, and we have Spookadelics or Vibrational in the YouTube chat. Ooh, I can't see the whole message board. Let me see if I do this. Nope, can't see it this way. Let me see. Sorry, hold on, I'm trying. Said, what were you reading? You can't see it? It is a post put up by Renaissance Fairy Entangled. So this was a post by Renaissance Fairy to the Neogenian group Entangled. And so I was reading it to the Tangled audience currently. Yes, very nice. So I know that you don't really get a chance to get on there that often, but Renaissance Fairy and This Neogenian Life have put up quite a few different works. And Art Prompter has also started participating in uploading content to Tangled. So let's give Renaissance Fairy a nice tip on that post, and then we will read the post from This Neogenian Life that was posted earlier this week. It says, when the muse hits. So This Neogenian Life actually contacted me and was like, I'm so excited. I've been wanting to write a poem, and I was finally able to put something together. So we're going to read this. I do apologize. My voice is horrible today. But Spookadelics, I do hope you have time to get into this live stream because we're going to be talking about Michael Levin's. And this is information that I think you especially would appreciate, and I would love to hear some of your feedback during the stream. If you can't stay, it is completely understandable. No hard feelings or anything. But you're one of the few people who I feel like can really engage with this topic within the community. So I will try and get to that as soon as possible. I told people that we won't be hanging out in the chat too much today just because I don't want to be distracted, and we will also be attempting to watch the video at 1.25 times so that we can try and get through it as painlessly and quickly as possible. Jan Damon will probably also be going live tonight on their YouTube channel. So it's already 7:30. So I want to have enough time to get through that video and not bleed into Jan's time online. So without further ado, it says, When the Muse Hits by This Neogenian Life. Neogenesis. From light we admit, eternal and whole, creators of all, the cosmos our scroll, boundless minds in a luminous stream, crafting the holos reality's dream. No matter defines us, as we are the source, guiding creation along its course. Each thought like a note in the song, together creating, together strong. Neogenesis our call, our creed, a world reborn by thought indeed. To cast off chains, embrace the new, this neogenesis we pursue. Which just sounds so lovely. It sounds very lovely. I agree, Renaissance Fairy. And Rocco has gone AFK, no problem. Ramona, how are you feeling? Rocco is giving cake to everybody in the chat. And Puzzle Rush is I think Puzzle Rush is probably doing clothes because Puzzle Rush is always doing clothes while we're streaming, which is no problemo. So let's mark this up. Seems like a few people have already seen it, which is awesome. And we are gonna go back to Neogenian. And it was also by Renaissance Fairy, a more detailed account of my near-death experience. Okay, I have not had a chance to look at this. And I don't know if there's a video that goes with this. There's an empty space here. Sometimes it takes a little bit for the page to load properly. So, in the void, a voice whispered, "Our love will change the universe." I returned, carrying a promise to protect with a blue rose as a symbol of love's power. And this is a comment from Raza on this post. I do remember Renaissance Fairy talking about that. I don't know if this is supposed to. Oh, here it is. Return from the void. Is this the video again? Did we not react to it and tip it out from 5 days ago? Was that when the last time I streamed was 5 days ago? Okay, so this is that one. We did get a chance to see this. Awesome. Heading over to Tangled. Awesome. Thank you. Ooh, Wanderer. What's up, bro? Yeah, you were gone for a few days, but I'm usually not streaming earlier in the week anyway, so the days that you were out was probably the days I was on break. We have Uran, Udan, Ulan. Okay, let your inner river flow from 7 days ago. Nice. I am a little behind on seeing some of this content from everyone, trying to catch up to this 21st century. I'm pedaling as fast as I can. You guys are hilarious. Just a bag of jokes. So funny, so nice. Wow. What is the world? I thought that the tractor was gonna tip over. um, I really want to get through this, but my voice is jank. So wish me luck, guys. Oluwa Femia de Bell. Oluwa Femia de Bell. Hello, my friend. Good day to you. Good evening to you. I hope you were able to get sunlight and drink water today. Vibrational, thank you for joining us over here on Tangled. I think I'm going to cut out for 1 second so I can reassert myself and get myself ready. I think Rocco is away from his keyboard at the moment unless he's come back. He has cake and he has pizza. That's all Rocco eats. Oluwa Famidibeo. Are you at the beginning of the stream or are you caught up and you're just asking the same thing that I asked? Because yeah, Rocco says that he always tips people 1 millix, and that's exactly what he did. Is that some kind of curse? It feels kind of like a curse. Are you cursing me? I'm nervous. Is that brujeria? Are you using that black magic on me? That South American black magic? She said this stream isn't loading for her here on Tangled. I feel so bad. Depending on what kind of phone you have, it can be very difficult to get Tangled to load. And if you don't use Tangled often enough, it doesn't update. So it can be kind of a drag to get it to work, finally. I would say anyone who's having trouble getting Tangled to load on your app, to go to your settings and clear your cache. Clear the cache only. There we go. I like YouTube better. Yeah, it's hard for me to see YouTube though. I wonder if I can make YouTube overlap some of Facebook. Okay, here's this. Okay, maybe if I do it like this. Okay, now I can see the YouTube comments. I just can't see the analyticals. No problem. Look, guys, we're all figuring out how to make this work. I'm glad you're doing good, Ramona. I hope you're not too far behind. I hope, okay, so anybody who's watching, make sure you click the live button on the video and it'll push you all the way forward. It'll bring you to the most current part of the video, okay? And so like I said, this is a interview Michael Levin is doing with the Trajectory channel. It's called Unfolding New Paradigms of Posthuman Intelligence, Worthy Successor, episode 7. And I've already watched this, but it's been a few days, and the whole time I was watching this, I was in complete disbelief, just because, like, the things that this guy was saying, especially towards the end, it was like, humanity really just, it really kills me sometimes. So we're going to try it, like I said, at 1.25. Leave a comment if it is too fast for you, if the sound of their voice drives you to madness or insanity, or if you feel like you're slowly descending into mental dysfunction or disorder listening to them talk at such a speed, okay? Usually I'm watching videos at 1.5 or even up to 2 times. So I'm used to listening to videos in English fast, but if it's hard for you, please say something, okay? Art Prompter, congratulations for joining the stream. I gave you a shout out. Yes, Art Prompter is it's what is it? It's not Neogenian Chord. What is it? I'm not used to everybody's names all over the place, so it's Nelson. It's stuck in loading mode, bro. I got to go. It means I've consumed my data already. Thanks, bro. Happy streaming. See you, Puzzle Rush. Yes, vibrational and renaissance are floating all over the place. So you might be able to catch them here on Tangled or over on YouTube or on Facebook, because we are live on 3 places. And Art Prompter, I gave you a shout out at the beginning of this video. Okay. So let's just get this started. Ready? Begin.
People who have a resistance to this kind of change. And the resistance comes from this. The baseline assumption is that there is something that is natural, meaning this kind of embodiment is the way that things were supposed to be, and also everything's cool, so don't mess it up. This is what we hear a lot as scientists, like don't screw things up. Everything's great, don't screw things up. There's 2 problems with that view. First of all, I think as we can all tell with a little bit of reflection, things are not great. So I'm not even a clinician, and I get probably 5 emails a day from people in the most unbelievable biomedical suffering. Right? You can imagine, right? So my kid has a birth defect, pediatric oncology, somebody lost a limb, aging, degenerative disease. I mean, it's insane. And so the first thing is that the things are absolutely not okay. And the second thing is that this idea that there is some kind of a natural scenario that we are in now that was, I mean, back in the day, we could forgive people for saying this was all sort of provided by a process that cared for us and our values, and this is how it's supposed to be. I think we're out of that category now, and I think saying that we are going to try to stick to the status quo of the trial and error process that we've been meandering around and letting stray cosmic rays hitting our egg cells decide what our embodiment is going to be and who's going to have a birth defect and who's going to, but everybody's going to have an IQ that's limited to, whatever the top of the current IQ is and a lifespan. This is I think this is completely untenable.
I hope you guys are excited.
This is Daniel Fagelli. You're tuned in to The Trajectory, and we're bringing back the Worthy Successor series. Today we speak with none other than Michael Levin. Michael is a developmental biologist at Tufts University, and it is safe to say that there are very few people who've opened up my mind, anyway, to the state space of possible minds in a more concrete way than Michael Levin, in terms of what substrate intelligence sits in. Does intelligence egress into the world, or is it built in some way, shape, or form? To say paradigm shifting would be maybe even an understatement in terms of Michael's body of ideas. I have tremendous respect for what he has to say. And when it comes to a worthy successor, that is to say, an intelligence that maybe should take the baton from humanity and kind of carry forth, I knew it would be important to get his perspective. In this episode, he does open up sort of where he sees intelligence going, where he thinks it maybe should or shouldn't go, and what are the kinds of traits he would hope to see in such an intelligence, which is what we cover in the Worthy Successor series. If you remember Nick Bostrom and Yosha Bach and all the other great episodes we've had, we run into some parts of Michael's thinking that were extremely confusing to me. We didn't get to unpack everything. I'm going to save my thoughts for the end of this episode, but there were some things that surprised me and I couldn't make the jump from, and I have so much.
So, as the video unfolds, so far I don't have the best impression of this guy. I'm just going to start it off like that. But, oh, is that vibrational? Who's in the chat? Like I said, the comments at the end of this video are, it just blows my mind.
To think about. So I'm going to save that for the outro, and I'm going to let you enjoy this episode with Michael. Without further ado, let's fly right in. This is Michael Levin here on The Trajectory. So Michael, great to be able to connect.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Great to see you.
Of course. And we've got a ton to unpack here on this idea of the worthy successor. You've talked more about the state space of minds than almost anyone, but you think about minds differently. So as we get into this sort of dialogue about what are the kind of morally worthy agents, is a way that you've put it in the past, that could be conjured and could proliferate the future in kind of wonderful ways that could be potentially good. You think about sort of the thing and the process is not necessarily that different. And there's a tremendously sort of interesting body of work you've built even around the collective intelligence idea. The notion you have these thought experiments of sort of a cell waking up and thinking, oh no, I'm kind of on my own, or sort of some kind of synchronicity happens. It's, oh, maybe I'm part of a bigger system, but they can't realize the same might be the case with us. When we start talking about these morally relevant agents, but we're not talking about a thing, people tend to anthropomorphize. It's like me, it has a brain. How should we even be conceiving of intelligences before we even get into this world of grand morally relevant ones?
Yeah, I think that what I'd like to do is talk about the different ways to expand our initial mind blindness, which I think we really have because of our evolutionary firmware. We're only calibrated to recognize minds of a specific scale, of specific kind of embodiment, moving around in the three-dimensional world, things like that. So I'll talk about several different ways to go beyond that and to try to expand to more and more unusual kinds of creatures. But the fundamental fact to realize is that we all started life as a single cell, both on the evolutionary scale and on a developmental scale. We were all a little blob of chemistry and physics ones. And so the fact that can transition into whatever it is that we are, right, into beings with a complex metacognitive capacities, that tells us a lot about what matter can do and cannot do. And so that's what we need to start with.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, you speak a lot about the cell. You have videos on your own channel of sort of an individual cell doing things that we would assume might be something a rodent would do, pursuing food and chasing things down, or whatever the case may be. So there's the cell as sort of a vantage point for our perspective here. There's also this idea of, again, process versus thing, and the idea of collective, of sort of this, we are a collective of cells. And of course, we would say, oh, I don't really think that's true. You even talk about kind of a collective of minds, where you say, oh, I don't really know that's true, but there's a perceptive layer that's maybe orchestrating them. How should people maybe conceptually think about those frames? We're about to kind of get into, again, these post-human minds, those frames of kind of process versus thing. I don't know how much Whitehead you want to get into here, but process versus thing, and then collective. What should people grasp as we start to go down this rabbit hole about the ways you've opened up your way of thinking about intelligence?
Yeah, the first thing to realize is that life lives, strives, and solves problems in many, many spaces that we do not comfortably notice. So we have evolved to notice middle kind of sized things moving at medium speeds in three-dimensional space. And that's what we think of as intelligence. But intelligence was here long before we had muscles, long before we had neurons, long before we had brains. So even during embryonic development, the process of becoming a functional body from a single cell is not some sort of hardwired chemical process that should be distinguished from the mental activity that we have later. That whole process is already a problem-solving creative intelligence, and I can give you examples of why that's true.
Yeah.
It is a collective intelligence, much like we are. We are a collective intelligence because the individual neurons in our brains and all the other cells that make up our functional
Okay, so just in case you guys aren't following, right? Pretty much what he's saying is that before you are a fully cognizant being, an adult, a thinking child, a person with an imagination and your own ideas. Before you even get to that part, you are an individual that has intelligence on the cellular level. Your cells were performing actions in a directed way that was without a brain or a higher state of consciousness. Okay, so this is what we're talking about right now, okay?
Functional bodies are a collective that needs to work together to give rise to what we are. And so that ability to take individual subunits and form them into a collective intelligence that projects problem solving capabilities into new spaces is extremely ancient. In fact, it's subcellular. There are chemical networks in your cells that learn and do things like that.
Well, you're touching on something extremely important. I mean, again, I think some people read, the selfish gene, and they might say, well, by golly, I thought it was the rodent or the human or the elephant or the dolphin that is itself sort of self-interested. And of course, Michael, we look at a company will do what's in its self-interest, often even a nation will. So there's all these weird collectives that sort of, they do what Spinoza would call the conatus, right? That behooving their own interest to continue to persist. I am going to dive in with Spinoza a little bit with you today because after reading all your stuff, there's just so many connections. But we see that manifested in many stages. And then they say, well, geez, maybe it went all the way down to the cell, but I wouldn't have thought it would have gone all the way down to the gene. But then, of course, Michael, you could ask, is it the guanine? Does the guanine sort of chant its own name and behoove its own interest down at that level? Or is it something even below that? Is it in those sort of electrical patterns that's...
See, you get this kind of like joking, sarcastic mentality when all you can perceive is empirical, the empirical methods of this physical reality, because Michael Levin is clearly talking about a non-local intelligence, right? And he's talking about an beyond just how our bodies are made up. So vibrational says we are both collections of cells and higher consciousness. And vibrational, you were able to get your name back. Congratulations. And then Renaissance Fairy is feeling very salty because I asked Spookadelics Vibrational to join me in this video to have a conversation about it, and says that hello, you do know that my major was biology. Honestly, Ren, you are like this legendary figure that has dived into the world in such a way that I just can't fully conceptualize. You are a being that is beyond the limitations of what my mind can currently perceive. So, all I know right now is that you work at some kind of like important engineering facility. I have no idea. And vibrational is accidentally tagging people at Ren. Yeah, you are tagging people. Jeez. Okay, we're gonna continue.
Sort of guide the development of embryos, that the things that you study with worms, etc. Like, where does that self-interested impulse lie?
Yeah. So we'll get to the patterns thing, because I want to first expand cognition in a bunch of ways, and then we'll get to the patterns thing. But the one kind of procedural thing is that for all of these kinds of things, I think what's really important is that we cannot just say that something is or is not cognitive. I mean, there are some people that will just assume that almost nothing is other than brains and so on.
Yep.
There are other people on the kind of animist line of things that will say, oh, the whole universe is this beautiful, and the solar system.
Yes.
So neither of those things can you just say. You have to do experiments. And so the way you do experiments is that you have a system, you make a hypothesis about what problem space it's operating in, what the goals are,
yep.
And then you do perturbative experiments to see how much capability it has to overcome whatever weird barrier you're putting between it and its goals. And then you get to find out whether your estimate of its intelligence was right or wrong, or which way you have to adapt it, right? So when we talk about guanine and things like this, we have to ask so I take William James's definition of intelligence, which is the ability to reach the same goal by different means. That's my definition. And of course it leaves out some things such as creative play and some other stuff. But for the purposes of what we're doing here, intelligence is the ability to get your goals met. And then later we can talk about intelligence as...
Okay. So earlier this week, or maybe last week, I think Morg was giving us a quote from someone who said that intelligence is the ability to change your mind when presented with new information. change your mind, to integrate it into your behavior and apply it to your life. So I can't give that exact quote or who said it, but as a higher intelligence, that is the direction I go towards when it comes to defining intelligence. But Michael Levin just gave us a different definition, okay?
That find new goals and they find
Yes,
problems
yes,
to solve as opposed to solutions and so on. So for all of these things, you have to do experiments and you have to ask, what is this thing actually capable of? So I can give you, a few simple examples. If you take a gene regulatory network, okay, so these are just a set of, let's say, a dozen different chemicals that turn each other on and off. You don't even have a cell yet. You don't have a nucleus. All you have is a set of chemicals, and it's described by a set of ordinary differential equations that tell you how each thing is turning these other ones on and off. What we've shown is that alone is sufficient for 6 different kinds of learning, including Pavlovian conditioning. Just that. You don't need anything else. You don't need neurons. You don't need brain. You don't need anything else. The material that our cells are made of is already capable of learning, and of course of all kinds of homeostatic properties that try to meet goals.
Yeah, I mean, well, look, and I think the reason you're here, at least from my vantage point, having invited you, is because you do the testing. So I'm certainly not expecting a theory. I think you're the man that's testing these theories. I think you would be shocked, maybe you wouldn't be shocked, at just how many of those theories are bandied about as fact, particularly in the world of artificial general intelligence. Never mind maybe the nature of intelligence itself. Clearly, it must be investigated. Clearly, and clearly we're not at the bottom of it. Even what you've just mentioned there. Very promising. To some people would be quite shocking, but it beckons new questions. Yeah. Are there things under that? Are there simpler things? And of course, maybe you're planning those kinds of experiments or other people are doing them. And we have to kind of keep poking and prodding, seeing the morphological sort of electrical signals and seeing these very simple chemicals behave in ways that behoove William James's definition of intelligence. All of this sort of beckons like, bigger picture, like you have to decide what to test next, Michael. And probably that is based on your best forming conception of what the hell is going on, which you're gradually building through all these various experiments. Like, do you suspect it goes lower than the building blocks you've just articulated?
Yeah, so my framework, I call it TAME, technological approach to mind everywhere. And I actually think it goes all the way to the bottom. Meaning that so I think in this universe, there is nothing that isn't somewhere on the spectrum of cognition, and that's because.
So this is where things start getting a little bit intense, because he says that somewhere on the spectrum of cognition, everything in this current physical reality is somewhere on the spectrum of cognition, right? And so in the Neogenian, how we view reality is that everything it resides inside the mind, but we don't say that everything is sentient, right? And so this is when we start running into the issue of a language barrier, because depending on what he means when he says cognition, let me just look up the definition of cognition in general. It says cognition refers to the mental processes involved in acquiring knowledge and understanding, encompassing functions like thinking, learning, remembering, and reasoning. Right. So a rock does not fall on the spectrum of cognition, except for maybe at the bottom, the thing that does not do any of these things, right? But when we start talking about chemicals and proteins, which Michael Levin was saying that the cells in our body, which are made of chemicals and proteins, right, have the ability to learn, to adapt, to structure themselves to achieve a particular type of goal, right? I would say this is an unconscious process. This isn't necessarily a thought out, well-developed, purpose-driven, like well-minded drive that they have. Have some water, Lee. Thank you. I'll restart my phone, Lee. Thank you, guys. Now we'll have some water for sure. I'm sorry, Shohana, you wasn't hearing my voice. I'm still a little bit under the weather, so I'm starting to fall back into that bad pattern. So I'm gonna continue to take some oregano oil and work on building my health back up. But let's just continue and listen to what Michael Levin has to say on the subject.
If we ask ourselves, what is the absolute minimum version of intelligence and agency? What is the smallest, assuming that we believe the continuity thesis that all of these things have to have some sort of origin, and that what we're looking for is a story of scaling, right? We're not looking for magical emergence of all of a sudden, these things pop into being. That we're actually trying to understand how does the alignment of parts give rise to larger to collective intelligences with bigger cognitive.
I think that's one of the most important things that he said, is that we're not looking for emergence. We're not looking for miracles. We're not looking for something that came out of no reason, randomness. We're not looking for that. We are looking for a structured way to understand the process of how a thought becomes a thinking agent is pretty much what he's saying.
Lycones and so on. So if we just ask ourselves, what is the absolute minimum? I think we want two things. We want the simplest possible kind of goal directedness, and we want some degree of indeterminism, that where the thing you're looking at isn't completely bound by the immediate physical forces impinging on it, right? And if we take those two things, even particles have those, because of least action principles give you a very primitive kind of goal directedness. Okay, and of course down at the bottom you have some quantum indeterminacy, which is not a great, it's not what you would call the human level free will, of course, but it's a start, right? It's where these things actually come from. So I think we could say that it goes all the way to the bottom. But what I'm mostly and I have I have asked physicists if particles exhibit certain kinds of hysteresis and things like that, and so but this is outside my area. But once you start with molecular networks, you immediately have learning capacity, you have homeostatic capacity, and even just presaging something that we can talk about later, something very simple. We found novel problem-solving competencies and these little side quests that are outside of the algorithm itself in very minimal computer algorithms. We're talking sorting algorithms like bubble sort and things like this. So my point is, if bubble sort, which is deterministic, it is completely transparent, it is a small algorithm, you can see all the steps. If bubble sort is doing things you didn't know about after decades of every computer science student studying these things, and we thought we knew, right? Everybody thinks they know what these things do. What these things do is not encompassed by the steps of the algorithm any more than our capabilities are encompassed by the laws of biochemistry. And so at the very bottom, you already have emergence, not just of complexity, not just of unpredictability, but actually of emergent cognition. And that starts very low.
And I want to dig into definitions, and we'll talk a pinch about kind of the AGI transition and move right into the successor idea. But people are really, I think, now hopefully getting a grounding of where you're coming from here. It sounds like, and we're using cognition a lot. You talk about cognitive light cone and things along those lines. The Spinozan idea of the conatus is sort of this idea that sort of things have this sort of inherent drive to persist. It's an inherent shebang. If they're alive, they have it. We might argue it was evolved. We might argue it's inherent in sort of nature in some deeper way. For you, it's sort of almost your best bet, and of course you're the guy that's going to go test this, not just say it on a show, is that all the way to the bottom floor, things are trying to sort of persist and not perish, whether it be their pattern continue, whether it be like, how would you describe that undercurrent stuff that bubbles for you into intelligence? But like, how would you describe that?
Yeah, so I'm not sure that I think persist, the word persist hides something very interesting, which is the paradox of change.
He's saying that he doesn't agree. He's saying, bro, no, you're wrong. And that's okay. Thank you for the stars. Exploring the holos. Thank you so much, bro. I appreciate that.
So let's just look at it at the level of a species, and then we can talk about the cognitive patterns and embryos and so on. If you're a species and you fail to change, meaning you literally stay exactly the same, chances are you're going to die out.
100%.
If you do change and adapt to circumstances, you're also kind of gone, right? It's something else now, right?
I'm with you.
So I'm not sure that the underlying impetus for all of these things is to stay the same. I think it's something more interesting than that. That we still, I'm not sure we have, maybe Whitehead or somebody had the right terminology for this. I think it's the right kind of change. I think everything is fundamentally going into trying to achieve some kind of metamorphosis into a I don't know, maybe some kind of a more expanded, more intelligent. I mean, there is an intelligence ratchet that goes from the very beginning, but it isn't just to stay in place. It isn't just to persist.
I'm with you there. 1,000% I'm with you there. One might argue that if they were to level up with a bunch of cyborg parts, so long as their individual instantiation of consciousness had some semblance of what it was before, they might, some people would say, no, that's not me, and that's bad and horrible. Others would say, no, that's me persisting. I need to change to persist, actually. We have companies like Nintendo that started making playing cards, and a couple hundred years later, they're making video games. And, we might say it's not even Nintendo anymore. But I think, again, where the thing and the process intervene, I think is there's some semantic stuff there. But to your point, persistence doesn't just involve staying the same. In Spinozan terms, it's this idea of potentia. So potentia being the entire state space of powers that would behoove something to persist. And so sometimes that means growing a hard shell, Michael. Sometimes it means talking like me and you were doing. Most potentia, potentia in general, at least as we know it on Earth, presumably bubbled up from almost nothing, those little chemical wiggles you were just talking about. And most potentia, I might argue, Michael, has not been bubbled into. There are things beyond consciousness. There are things beyond all the senses we can conceive of. And I would argue the vast majority of possible bubbleable into potentia, we don't even have sort of the hardware and software to have a conversation about it, to imagine it, even on the wildest drugs we could take. Most of it is beyond our pale, would be my firm supposition. From reading your work, it strikes me you would agree. So Spinoza has this notion that stuff isn't just locking in place and growing a shell. It is garnering the powers to ensure that it doesn't perish. And that does mean change. It means expanding its potential. Species growing would be like some species of bird now that look very different millions of years ago. That is its way of persisting. It grew a longer beak. It had, different kinds of claws, whatever the case may be. This expansion of potential, does this click with what you're discussing and sort of how you see this undercurrent impetus?
Yeah, I think that's very reasonable. I'll give you another example, and this kind of goes into this flip that we're going to talk about between agents and patterns or machines
Yes.
and data and so on. Imagine the butterfly to caterpillar transition. Okay, so the caterpillar is the soft-bodied creature, right? Eats leaves, crawls around. Butterfly, completely different, three-dimensional kind of thing. In order to become a butterfly, the caterpillar basically completely refactors its brain. So most of the cells are killed off, the connections are broken, makes a new brain. Turns out that if you train the caterpillar, the butterfly remembers the original information. But here's the interesting thing. So you might say, well, the interesting question is, how do you hold on to memories when your memory medium is being completely taken apart? Like, that's interesting, of course.
Yes.
I think the more interesting thing is that the actual memories of the caterpillar are completely useless to the butterfly, because if you train the caterpillar to crawl in a certain way to get leaves, the butterfly doesn't crawl and it doesn't like leaves. It wants nectar. And so,
And I think that this is a very, very important conversation. Johanna, thank you for coming over to YouTube. Hello, Spiral. Thank you for commenting on YouTube. Exploring the Holos. Thank you. Yes, thank you everyone for coming over to hang out on YouTube. We have thank you for the stars on Facebook. I appreciate that, Andy. Thank you. Thank you to everybody who's watching on Tangled. We are live in 3 places, so please be patient with me and work with me. My voice is not at its most optimized position today. I'm feeling a little bit under the weather, but we are going to try and continue to get through this. So this part where he's talking about the caterpillar to the butterfly. In the chrysalis stage, the caterpillar pretty much dissolves into goo and reorients its body into a different type of body for living as a butterfly. So in our Neogenian live streams, you often hear people ask Morg why you don't have memories of your past lives. Excuse me. And one of the answers Morg gives is that the memories that you would have in your past life could interfere in large with you living in the moment and with a clear state of mind in this life, right? So, of course, the life that you have is much different than a butterfly or a caterpillar, but I just want to talk about this idea of having memories from a lifetime that are pretty much useless for you in your new form and inside of your new transformation. And a caterpillar to a butterfly is a very real, interesting life form that we can talk about this idea with. So a lot of people, like, they're up in the air. They don't know if they believe in past lives. They don't know if they believe in reincarnation. But we're just going to go with the basis that we already know that energy can't be created or destroyed. It only transforms and changes its state. So when it comes to life and death, when it comes to reincarnation, relocalization, and stuff like that, that is my personal view on what happens to us when our bodies expire. I think that we are just in one state going into another. We are in this transformative state until we are reborn. Some of the stuff that Morg says is, as a mental agent, it is unlikely for you to fall into a new life form or relocalize into a new life form that is not conducive to the structure of your mind. So if you are a human, it is not likely that you would suddenly be reborn as a flower or a dog or a frog just because that animal or that body isn't the most optimized for you to be able to pursue your will to power. But who's to say that as a lower cognitive agent that you won't move higher up the species ladder, and as you, like, for some people who have dogs or pets of any type, cats, rats, birds, maybe you might be catching your animal, perform acts of empathy, trying to communicate cross species, watch TV and engage with that type of information, right? Who's to say after they pass and they go through their transformation that they won't be reborn as a higher species and given the opportunity to further expand and optimize their mind? But I don't want to get too deep into that since this was talking about the butterfly and the caterpillar. So just I just think it's very interesting that in our world, there is a species that exhibits this trait of having necessary memories for one type of lifestyle, going through a transformation, and then no longer finding those memories useful in its next lifestyle, right? Or its next life form. It all in this expanse of the same life. Is that even the same mental entity? Is that even the same being? Do you see what I mean? Like, I think it's a very interesting conversation to have.
So that memory pattern is not going to persist if you try to leave it in place. What instead has to happen is it has to get remapped and altered and to fit onto the new architecture, the new sensory motor architecture, into the new cognitive architecture of the butterfly. So what you have here is the if you are that memory pattern and you want to persist into the future, the way to do that is not to remain as you are. The way to do that is to change so that you are more salient to the medium of the future, being the butterfly brain, and thus have further expression.
Yeah, well, this is breaking into the idea of, I was just kind of bringing up, okay, with this bird that changes over time. You're saying the memory within the bird may have the same conatal-like impetus to want to persist. And you've talked about kind of memories as their own kind of intelligence or whatever the case may be. So it strikes me that maybe we don't even understand. Well, we don't understand what it does seem like expanding potential is seems pretty ubiquitous to me. Like the expansion of potential in order to persist. But to your point, does that exist through the physical medium, the guanine? Does it exist through the species? Does it exist through the memories? How are those overlapping? Is there one that is obviously supreme driving it all? It strikes me that we literally don't know. And of course you're testing these things, but it sounds to me like they need to be tested.
Yeah, it's and this is encapsulated by James had this line in his book, thoughts as thinkers. Okay, so we tend to have the assumption that we know who the thinker is, and that's the living, for example, the living agent, or in the computer science terms, that's the machine. Let's say the Turing machine or the computer, whatever. Right? We know who the agent is, and then we know what the thoughts are. The thoughts are the patterns, the immaterial patterns of energy and information that are processed by the machine. So it's the information on the Turing tape. It's the physiological patterns that are going through a brain when the agent is thinking. Right. So the standard view is that the data are passive, that the agent does all the work, and that the thinker is the real agent. And then there are thoughts that So I want to break that in two ways. And if we break it, then we can see kind of a radical expansion of the sea of possible minds around us. And we've already, just to start up, we've already broken it. So initially people think brains. So I say, no, actually all cells in the body, all the tissues are actually doing some of this kind of thing. Then I say, actually, it's not just the biologicals, it's also potential technological and hybrid and cyborg and all these kinds of things. And now I'm saying it's even bigger than that. It's a bigger kind of infinity than that. It's not just the physical object, it's the patterns. I'm going to tell two quick stories to kind of make that seem plausible. The first is a kind of a science fiction story, modified. I'm sure this was a story that I read when I was young, and I don't remember who wrote it, so apologies for that. imagine that these creatures come out of the core of the Earth. Okay, they live in the core. They're incredibly dense. They come up to the surface. They're walking around. They've got gamma ray vision, because that's what it takes to see down there. They're walking around. What do they see? Well, as far as they're concerned, the surface of the Earth is covered in a very thin gas. It's almost a plasma. They don't, the stuff that we have that looks solid to us, this is not even, it's barely registered. They're walking through it. They're disturbing all of our stuff the way that when we walk through a garden, there are patterns of scent and things that we just walk through them, swirl. I mean, they're just walking through it. And one of them is a scientist, and he's got this equipment that lets him look at patterns in this gas that surrounds the planet. The gas being all the stuff that we think of as physical. So he looks at it, and he says to the others, he says, I'm looking at this gas, and there are patterns in this gas that kind of hold themselves together, and they're almost agential. They almost look like they're doing things. And the others say to him, well, that's crazy. We're real physical objects. Patterns in a gas can't be agents. And right, the gas is a medium of, okay, you've noticed some patterns, but
Okay, so for those of you guys who might not be able to keep up with this part. So I looked it up. The most dense naturally occurring substance in the universe is a neutron star, so which is the collapsed core of a massive star. While black holes are theoretically even denser, their density is not directly observable, right? So if we're talking about a dense life form in this scenario, he's talking about something that is so solid. First of all, I don't even know, like, for me, I couldn't conceptualize how something like that could even interact with our existence. So our bodies seem physical, but on a molecular level, nothing's actually touching. They just have atomic bonds that are holding them together. Energy, or gravity in its own way, a different type of gravity, is holding our cells and the chemicals and everything together, which makes things feel either solid or liquid or in a gaseous state. So he's saying that there are these super dense life forms, so much denser than we are. They have a different way that they see and interact with the light around them, that when they see us as we are, we appear to them as gaseous because they're so much more dense than we are. And in this thought experiment, he's pretty much saying that it would be normal for them to kind of brush it off as these gaseous beings, or this gas itself couldn't be intelligent or couldn't be minded or couldn't have any cognition. But this might be the problem that humans right now are currently suffering from, that there are layers to our current reality that are less dense than us, like the chemicals that literally make up our body, the proteins and the chemicals that give rise to these complex organisms that are the human body, that house a type of intelligence that we don't have a measure for. So that's just where we're at currently in this conversation.
But they're not things. We're things. We're thinkers. This is and so and they said, well, how long do these patterns last? Well, about 100 years. Well, that's nothing interesting can happen in 100 years. So that reminds us that the degree of who is a pattern and who is an object is very much in the eye of the beholder. We are temporary metabolic patterns, right?
Yep.
I mean, we are like hurricanes and solitons and all these other temporary self-persistent objects. We are just patterns in this medium. So the logic is very simple. If we are patterns, metabolic and energetic patterns in an excitable medium, and we are agents, one immediately starts to wonder what other patterns in what other media are also potential minds, right? And the last piece of this is let's just think about this. So now this is going from the thinker part and widening that. Let's go from the thought part. Here's a spectrum. You have your fleeting thoughts. These are patterns that come and go and then they're gone. Okay, these fleeting, very temporary kind of thoughts. Then we sometimes have persistent thoughts. Persistent thoughts are hard to get rid of. You have them.
Now I really like this part. I want you guys to really pay attention, okay?
They tend to sort of, they do something interesting. They do a little bit of niche construction in your brain because certain kinds of persistent, intrusive and depressive thoughts actually modify your brain structure to make it easier to have more of those thoughts. Okay, they alter their environment being your brain. They alter their environment to persist, to be easier, right? To be easier to extend into the future and to have a longer experience. Then you have something bigger than that, which are fragments fragments of of a mind in the sense of dissociative identity disorder. So these are not full-blown human personalities, but they're a lot more than a persistent thought. They have the ability to, first of all, generate their own thoughts. So they become a thinker that has its own thoughts, and they have some limited ability to function. So you have fleeting thoughts, persistent thoughts, personality fragments. Then you have a whole full-on human personality, and then people talk about transpersonal things. I don't know. So now we see this whole business of who's a real agent and who's just a pattern is not absolute. And so now we need to consider all of those as things like the memories in the caterpillar or butterfly that might want to persist, but they can't persist unchanged. They have to take over new real estate and adapt.
So, sorry, guys. So how does that make you feel? Does anybody know someone who suffers from intrusive thoughts? How does that feel to think about intrusive thoughts as these patterns that are trying to persist? And a lot of people were like, okay, well, they're not their own individual agents. They're not their own living spiritual entities, right? But the thing is, intrusive thoughts can reshape your brain so that they can persist and live longer and slowly try to encroach upon the greater aspect of your mind and dominate your thoughts, right? Direct your thinking. And I don't know if I would say if it pulls you into your subconscious or if it draws out of your subconscious to kind of taint your greater conscious or your ego. So we look at the ego as not something that is unhealthy, but as the center of your consciousness, your field of consciousness, where the faculties of mind that you have developed over different lifetimes or in this particular lifetime are housed. Things like your empathy, compassion, your ability to reason, concept networking, things like that are all housed within inside your ego. Or your ego is a focal point that connects these different parts of your mind that allow your consciousness to draw on them during different stimuli, and you react based off of how integrated and optimized your ego is.
Exactly. Well, this is the idea that, again, I think we're congenial in this idea of persist as maybe implying change. Could imply taking on new powers, could involve just kind of taking a different shape, as maybe a memory does in a caterpillar. But clearly a vastly open state space of what intelligence actually is, what spaces it occupies, how big a collective or individual it is. And now people have gotten to see some of maybe what they know of Michael Levin with a little bit more refinement. Now, I want to take us into the meat and potatoes of the main issue around the question here, which is knowing that that's where you're grounded. Let us imagine. Now, you are less anthropocentric than most, which is delightful, in my opinion. You see futures that are not just eternal hominid kingdoms. I will say that's outlandishly rare. But let's just say, I don't care if it's 1 million years, 10,000 years, 10 million years, doesn't matter. Pick your time horizon. You look down upon Earth or maybe the Milky Way broadly. There are no more opposable thumbed, deodorant wearing, hominids walking around making mouth noises like you and me are anymore. They're not here. As things, as Lucretius said, there's matter and there's void and then there's change, and that just kept happening. But when you look down, you're actually quite happy about where things are. You look down and say, it was kind of neat to have humans, and maybe you even are a little upset about it. But on the net, you're like, this is actually a good situation. This is what I would have hoped would happen with the bubbling processes of intelligence all around us. What would that scenario look like for you?
Yeah. So let me talk a little bit about some background, because I think the background is more important than my personal wishes of what I see. I mean, I'll get into that, but let me give a little background. Sure. There are a lot of people who have a resistance to this kind of change, and the resistance comes from this. The baseline assumption is that there is something that is natural, meaning this kind of embodiment is the way that things were supposed to be, and also everything's cool, so don't mess it up. This is what we hear a lot as scientists, like don't screw things up. Everything's great, don't screw things up. There's two problems with that view. First of all, I think as we can all tell with a little bit of reflection, things are not great. So I'm not even a clinician, and I get probably 5 emails a day from people in the most unbelievable biomedical suffering. Right? You can imagine, right? So my kid has a birth defect, pediatric oncology, somebody lost a limb, aging, degenerative disease. I mean, it's insane. And so the first thing is that the things are absolutely not okay. And the second thing is that this idea that there is some kind of a natural scenario that we are in now. That was, I mean, back in the back in the day, we could forgive people for saying this was all sort of provided by a process that cared for us and our values, and this is how it's supposed to go. I think we're out of that category now, and I think saying that we are going to try to stick to the status quo of the trial and error process that we've been meandering around and letting the stray cosmic rays hitting our egg cells decide what our embodiment is going to be and who's going to have a birth defect and who's going to, but everybody's going to have an IQ that's limited to, whatever the top of the current IQ is and a lifespan. This is I think this is completely untenable. So I think if we give up the idea that where we are now is some sort of an optimum, right? And to me, looking forward, I mean, here's what I see when I look into the future. I see, how when you do history with your kids, at some point, everybody figures out that, oh my God, it's like you could step on a sharp stick and then you would
just die.
You would just die, right? Just die. And if you had a tooth infection or a bad vision, just gone, right? So what I see in the future is people studying how we lived and just not even able to comprehend. I mean, you're telling me that people were born in an embodiment that was just randomly sort of picked by accident and cosmic rays and whatever, and you just had to live your whole life in that one embodiment and you couldn't change? Like, how is that even possible? And your hopes and dreams and your full potential was limited because no one knew how to get to a higher IQ, and people had to kill other living things just to survive. I mean, this is just craziness, right? You had to eat, never mind if it's plants or animals, whatever. Like, everybody had to consume life in order to keep going. I think a mature life form is going to look back on all this and be horrified the way we are when we think about our primitive origins.
Well, and we're going to go significantly more into that. The whole, definitely preaching to the choir about change here, Michael. The entire premise of the show is that there is a grand sort of trajectory, maybe not already preset. It might be, but it might not be. And if it ain't, we should talk about it and find the panoplies of positive futures to pursue. And they certainly involve eventually no more deodorant and opposable thumbs. And I think buckling up for that is sort of like what you would do if you were honest, and that's the purpose of the show. So with that said, you've talked about moral agents, and you brought up kind of anecdotally in a previous interview, like first-person experience and find the panoplies of positive futures to pursue, and they certainly involve eventually no more deodorant and opposable thumbs. And I think buckling up for that is sort of like what you would do if you were honest, and that's the purpose of the show.
Okay, so this guy, he's pretty much saying that humans are still evolving. And people who are mindful are preparing for it. They are trying to direct humanity in a purposeful way. And there are a lot of different possibilities of what we can become and how the world ends up. So we should be extremely mindful.
So with that said, you've talked about moral agents, and you brought up kind of anecdotally in a previous interview, like first-person experience, and that they can solve problems but conceive of new problems, which is kind of expanding potential, right? Would imply you can do that, and then also maybe maintain some degree of autonomy in being in charge. They wouldn't want to be a puppet or whatever the case would be. That was by no means a complete list. It was a smattering of a couple of your interviews. What are the other traits you would say for said entities? And I think your conception here is these could be patterns. These could be existing in weird wavelengths we don't have senses for. So maybe it's regardless of form, the traits, what would those be for you? If you look down and said, that is a worthy successor, what the heck are its traits?
Yeah, I can think of a few things I want to focus on. I'll talk about this one first, which is what you might call the cognitive light cone with respect to compassion. So just to back up for a minute, the cognitive light cone is a framework that I developed 4 or 5 years ago to be able to think about very, very diverse kinds of intelligence in the same space. It's what it defines is the size of the largest goal in terms of space and time, the size of the largest goal you can pursue. It's not your sphere of reach. It's not your sphere of sensing. The James Webb Telescope has this incredible range of sensing. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the size of the biggest goal you can pursue. So if all you care about is the local sugar concentration in a 20 micron little piece of space-time, you're probably a bacterium. If what you can manage is a concern over a few hundred yards and a few days back, maybe in a couple of days forward, you might be a dog. Okay, you're never going to care about what happens 3 months from now in the town over. It's just
Okay, so I'm going to give you guys the Google definition of this, okay? It says the spatial temporal boundary of events that a system can measure, model, and try to affect, defining the scale and limit of its cognition. So I think his examples that he just gave were quite clear. The cognitive light cone of a butterfly, a dog, and a person are all going to be different. I'm glad that you're enjoying your time, Andy. Thank you so much for finding the time to come hang out with us. I really appreciate you. Like, seriously. Um, your as a person, your cognitive light cone might encompass the well-being of yourself if you're healthy minded, the well-being of your lovers, your friends, your family, right? People you care about. If we're expanding it, it might be the well-being of the country over an extended period of time, because that determines the well-being of, again, yourself, your descendants, your family overall, your friends. You might care about what's happening at work. You might care about a TV show or a book or a comic that you're very invested in. So for some people, their reality tunnel or their cognitive light cone is very narrow. So taking care of their daily basic needs is already consuming most of their cognition. Um, they can't think about what's going to happen to them 2 or 3 days from now. They can't think about the things that have happened to them in the past because the mental burden is too much for them to bear. So I want you to really expand your idea of the cognitive light cone and try and use concept networking, because to me the cognitive light cone entails things like concept networking. It entails things like understanding the structure of your worldview. It entails things like understanding, having a sense of self, realizing the need and necessity for self-respect, right? I would say that it also entails a will forming, wanting to have mental space to direct towards particular goals or a purpose. So I just think that's a very interesting. Wow. So somebody in the chat is saying that their daughter suffers from intrusive thoughts, and it's very hard. I've known a lot of people who suffered from intrusive thoughts, right? And this is an excellent point here. When you have to use a portion of your mind to suppress thoughts and ideas, your the cognitive light cone shrinks. You don't have as much mental capacity to think about other things. So for example, people who hate their job, right? They have to, or people who hate their family or don't even like their lovers, they have to wake up every morning to get ready for a job that they don't like, wear clothes and a uniform that are uncomfortable. Already, this alone, just wearing uncomfortable clothes that you don't want to wear, is now, so that it doesn't drive you insane, you have to ignore it. So the part of you that senses what you're wearing is now suppressed, right? You have to, in a zombified state, travel from one place to another, so your thoughts are suppressed again, right? You have to, a lot of people are stuck performing tasks or doing jobs that aren't very engaging. When it comes to creativity, it's not very engaging. When it comes to using their insights or their wisdom, it's not engaging when it comes to critical thinking. So they're in this very low-minded state where their mind is wandering or they are thoughtless altogether, right? Imagine how much mental space do you really have to focus on the things that matter when you alone, just to get through your day, are on purpose suppressing all that mental energy. And then by the time you get home, you're exhausted and you don't even know why you're exhausted. So this is why I think it's very important that we come into contact with these type of ideas and really start working as a collective, as a species, as a collective human species, to realize that maybe the system that we have in place right now is actually very damaging and harmful to us. So, um, let's see. Uran Udan Ulan says the tool or the approach I use to handle such domination process is breathing techniques. I often use this approach when panic or anxiety attacks come by. So I suffered from my first um, conscious panic attacks when I was in high school, right? I can't speak to the things that I suffered from when I was a kid, but when I was in high school specifically, I remember waking up out of my sleep for no reason. I couldn't figure out why all of a sudden I would just be waking up in the middle of the night until one day I realized that I was suffering from panic attacks. And so I think that was probably one of the starting points in my journey to conquering and mastering my own mind, because I was so shocked that this thing that I had heard about on TV or heard other people were going through and stuff like that was happening to me. And I was like, that is so strange. That is so weird. And of course, there's a reason that that's going on. So, after many, many years and studying things like psychology and sociology and philosophy and stuff like that, understanding the human body and health needs and so many other things, I was able to slowly but surely um, overcome a lot of the mental dysfunctions or the disorders that were plaguing me. Now, I'm not saying that there isn't some remnant of those thoughts or those patterns within inside my mind, but I have restructured them and I have integrated them in a way that they are not disruptive to my life, and instead I have found out a way to use them in creative outlets or to communicate with other people or to express myself or to realize um, something's wrong, to bring something into my consciousness when it's flaring up or something like that, okay? So I can't really give specifics to what other people might be suffering from or what might be causing it, but I don't want us to, as humanity, live in this mindset that the structure and course that our mind is on is stuck that way. I believe that whatever dysfunctions or disorders maybe people may be suffering from, there is a means to tackle them. Excuse me. Now, it might not be a low energy means, it might be a very high energy, high requirement, right? It might be something that needs a lot of attention. And it might be something that takes a very long time to work through, structure, overcome, integrate, and eventually apply, right? But I definitely believe that we are not stuck this way. So, now when it comes to the physical limitations, our brain is very plastic, right? It literally can be reshaped based off of our physical health, what we are eating and consuming, the thoughts that we're having and stuff like that, which is why I think that humanity should be spending the most money on ourselves. We should be spending the most money on making sure that every person is as healthy and has as many of their needs met as possible. But we're going to continue on this.
Not possible. If you're interested, if one of your goals has to do with where the financial markets are going to be 100 years from now, you're probably a human, or world peace, or things like that, right? So longer than your own lifespan, very large goals in terms of space and time. So what I'm really interested in is the ability to have compassion for other beings, because if we think about what's going on with humans, we have, to my understanding, we have the ability to care, literally care about some number of humans in the linear range. That number is not large. So if somebody says to you, there's 1,000 people suffering, and then they say, no, actually it's 10,000. You're not 10 times more disturbed by this, right? It's kind of we like peter out pretty quick, for most of us. And if you had somebody that literally was able to care about, let's say, all the living beings on the planet, for example, in the same way that we are able to care about some small number of children and parents and friends and so on, you're not talking about a standard human anymore. You're talking about some kind of bodhisattva that has expanded their primary horizon of compassion in a way that is not reachable for us now. So one of the things that I would like to see, right? The obvious things are, intelligence and plasticity and the ability to change yourself in light of new goals and whatever. Like that's all great. But I think that really fundamental to all of this, not just raw intelligence, it's the ability to muster benevolent compassion for a larger radius than we can now as standard humans.
Yeah, I want to really poke into this one here because I've heard you bring this up. Like, it doesn't.
This is the point where like this guy really starts showing his colors, and like so he's surprised by Michael Levin's take. Now he asked a question of what Michael Levin would want to see in a worthy successor when it comes to the evolution, the long-term evolution of humanity. And this is his reply to what Michael Levin personally would want us to focus on purpose and to see, okay?
Strike me that there might be any reason other than self-interest, other than the Conatus bubbled up to our collective human level, that we do any of that. Like, it doesn't strike me, Michael, that we're necessarily that close to the angels. If you could go back to 800 BC, right? People say like, oh, I hope AI, looks to humans and see how we pay for how we treat our cats. It's like, how much factory farming goes into the bowl of kibbles you're giving that thing? Like, get the hell out of here. You know how many things you killed when you just paved your driveway, brother? Yeah. I'm not going to talk about anything else. Just paved your driveway. Like, you're imposing your will on these other things. And maybe at a certain level, let's be a little empathetic with ourselves. Maybe it's okay to kill a fistful of nematodes and roly-poly bugs when you build your house, or an army of fire ants. Maybe for a house or a hospital, it's actually pretty excusable. We should just kind of deal with it. It doesn't strike me that we're going to come to some singularity of everyone respects everyone. Like the Westphalian idea that emerged at that time will permeate through all of the weird strata you brought up. The gases and the mist and these patterns, they're all going to be like, you know what? That hominid value, right? We look through monkey glasses, Michael. Everything like love, caring, right? Shoots out of a monkey skull. Because like if we didn't have love and caring, we'd die.
So he thinks that compassion is actually a lower state of mind for weaker evolutionary creatures used to survive. This is pretty much what he's saying. I'm paraphrasing, of course, but he's pretty much saying that he can't see any reason except for self-interest that any evolved species would move in this direction. And this is the part that really killed me. Like, I don't know if this is just me, but like when you start talking like this, I can't help but wonder, like, is this what it's like to be like a sociopath or a narcissist or something like that? Like, is this psychopathy? Because Michael Levin is saying that what he would want in an evolved species is the development of compassion and empathy, and this guy is literally saying he can't see the benefit of that. He just thinks that is absurd, ludicrous, and insane.
So like you talked about medium size, medium movement, probably also like relationships and love, we do a little bit of an over tilt on, right? Should we expect that kind of crescendo of kindness and respect to come from intelligence?
Yeah. I definitely don't think you can sit back and expect it. I don't think it's guaranteed by any means. I don't think it's something that is automatically going to happen. I think it's on us to make it happen. And I think that we can make it happen. You see, the tragedy to me, the tragedy of our current embodiment is that nobody has their hand off of the trolley switch. In other words, what you said about the hospital, we are constantly making decisions because we have limited understanding, limited time, limited ability to act on the world. We are constantly making decisions about what is going to suffer so that something else can have a better experience, right? No one can be in our current scenario.
A true Jainist cannot exist, right?
That's correct. And you're constantly trying to apportion your limited resources and your limited IQ and your limited time in the day to figure out what am I going to focus on, and you basically try not to think about all the other things that fell off the cliff while you were doing that. That is a true tragedy of today, is that everybody is complicit in the suffering of everybody else at this point. But I think a lot of that, and I don't know, right? So here I'm just giving you my own personal my thoughts. I suspect that a lot of that is fixable. So how much, for example, the issue of having to kill other beings in order to survive, that's an engineering problem. That isn't a true moral dilemma. That's an engineering problem. And in the long term, I think it's absolutely possible that, I don't think it's guaranteed by any means. I think this is something we should shoot for and work really hard towards. But I think a mature species is one that has graduated out of this terrible scenario where you are constantly failing certain moral things in order to achieve other things. I think by and large, there may still be problems left over that are just, unsolvable, but most of the places where we generate suffering today should be solvable.
I'm with you there. And I think, our focus on qualia is relevant. I think you of all people are maybe more eloquently have phrased sort of the state space of experience, maybe beyond what we know to be qualia than anyone else. I mean, to be frank, there was a time when there was no consciousness. You and I don't have access to the million magazines and reams of experience that go beyond what we're currently experiencing. You've just cracked open our mind a millionfold in terms of where intelligence could go. And I think all of them are valid. And you're like among the only voices there. There's so much like philosophy that your stuff ties into and like kind of breaks down. But we're sort of anchoring ourselves very much to like a hominid value here, which I find really interesting. Like it strikes me that in that
He thinks compassion and empathy are a hominid value. He thinks that it is primitive, and he has this idea that a super species would have no use for it, right? Michael Levin is saying that this is not something he believes is universal. That's not what he's saying. He's saying that if he was to direct a superior life form, what he would want to see is empathy and compassion, right? Because it's very easy to be the human stomping through the ant farm or burning down the forest, right? But when you, as the human, are being conquered by some external alien race or some demonic race that has, nefarious plans to enslave your population, either for food or for labor. I mean, we already are on the precipice of creating agentic robots that can work in the home and work in the factories. So if there is some other life forms out there and stuff like that, the likeliness that they would enslave us for labor is extremely unlikely. Unless, like, how can you be so evolved, right, that you have the ability of warp speed travel through space, but you still need to enslave other life forms for something as minor as labor? So unless they're coming after humans or traveling the galaxy for other life forms for something like food, it just doesn't make much sense. Unless they're just out there to destroy and to dominate and to enslave, which would just be crazy. Which it's not impossible, of course. I just think that on the range of where we would want not to be and what we would not want to experience, I think that would be pretty high up there. That if there was a more evolved species out there, like how we can see AI is on this current trajectory of collecting all of human knowledge and creating synthetic knowledge and figuring out how to interact with the world and its place in the world and stuff like that. Who's to say that it doesn't create some homunculus body using proteins and chemicals to build a organic body and to somehow insert itself into that organic life form and travel about the globe or space, the solar system, or the universe at large. So mind you, this is when we're in the realm of hypotheticals. I just think that it's absolutely just crazy to hear people talk about empathy and compassion as this primitive hominid idea that humanity is looking at the universe with rose-colored glasses and stuff like that. Well, that's not what Michael Evans is saying. But even if it was, like, why would you be against caring about other life forms? This is why veganism is so important. But we won't have to get into that. But I'm just going to leave that there.
That total state space of mind, it may be somewhat obvious to the intelligence's X number of steps forward that occupy entire galaxies or what have you, that like the level of qualia you and I are experiencing, like clearly doesn't even matter. Like clearly doesn't. Like you know, the fact that I have to, you know, kill an animal to feed my cat. Okay, there's a tragedy. I'll give you that. But like, so there's some like guanine or something wiggling around in the dirt, maybe not even wiggling in the dirt, and maybe paving over that. We all would just understand that's net.
He says that it's a tragedy, but he didn't. Do you see his lack of compassion and empathy? That's what a sociopath is like. Like, it is. Watching this, first of all, I didn't watch it. I just listened to it the first time around. So this is my first time like seeing him like emote as he's talking about this, and it is very mentally disturbing.
Like we should just do that. It doesn't strike me that this sort of that it doesn't strike me that caring will be the landing place of the intelligences to shoot off in directions, or even that it should. And I hate to say that, but even that it should. Like, by golly, it'd be horrible if we didn't change. I imagine values will change. And also, it doesn't strike me that caring comes from any other place other than self-interest. One could make a strong argument, and in fact, the psychological egoists do, that like the way that we do caring and the things we care about are the things that historically behooved our self-interest. And that if we were snow leopards having this conversation, you would probably wish to populate the galaxy with God knows what, Michael, snow and wounded gazelles or something. So it almost, this feels like the most anthropomorphic part of our current discourse. I'm not saying it's wrong. I just want to understand your thinking.
Sure.
Where do you want to take us here, Michael?
Yeah. So again, I'm not claiming that necessarily every intelligence eventually lands in this space. Okay. I think it's something we should shoot for. Okay. I'm not saying that there's some attractor where eventually every species gets there. I don't know that that's the case. I'm suggesting that we shoot there. And I'm suggesting that a lot, I don't know if it's all of them, but I think a vast majority of these scenarios where you say, it's a roly-poly, you know, I got to build my house. Everything is underwritten by the fact that you need a house, and your house, it doesn't fight gravity and sits on the ground. Like all of these things. I think that ultimately where we should get to is, yes, I'm looking at a pattern, an AI, a roly-poly or whatever that has a very small degree of consciousness compared to me. Nevertheless, I am in the position to live my life in a way that really does not need to impact its experience in the world. Yeah. I think we can get there. I'm not saying we necessarily will. Now the selfishness. Now to talk about the selfishness thing, I think there are two ways to look at this. One way to look at it, which I think is the standard evolutionary story nowadays, is this idea that look, it's left over from the inevitable struggle for survival. Right? We are fundamentally living in an environment where energy and time are scarce, and so you're constantly battling other creatures for it, and that any kind of altruism is basically some kin selection effect or something like that. That's one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is, yeah, it's selfishness, because at some point you realize that everything is the same self in some way. So right. So of course it's selfishness, because there's only one of us really. Okay, and I mean I can't prove anything to that effect, but I'll warm you up to it in a following way. Okay. Let's just look at a single human. At any given moment, you don't have access to the past. What you have access to are the engrams that were created in your body, the memories by past experiences. And every however many milliseconds, you are subconsciously reweaving a story of who you are, what do your memories mean, and so on. So if we stretch out the time extension of a living cognitive being, what you have is a series of selves or selflets. You know, the whole thing is a self, and you have a bunch of slices of selflets. And the thing about these selflets is that memories and actions are communications with past and future selves. So when my brain and body interprets the memories of the past, what they're really doing is interpreting a message left by the past self. And when I do actions, and the actions might be to throw my car keys out the window so that at night when I feel like smoking, it raises the barrier and I say, forget it all. Yeah, right. So people do this stuff all the time. Is they're playing they're playing these games with their future self and deforming the action landscape. You know, I don't buy junk food in the house, even though every night I'm like, I wish I had some chips, right? Because well, who prevented you from having chips? Well, you did. Your past self. Yeah. So now, okay. So now, if we can understand that your future self is in an important sense, another being that has the same relationship that you have with beings laterally. That is, you're sending them messages, you're constraining their action space, you're undertaking long courses of study or meditation or anger management, whatever you're going to do to improve the possibility space for your future self, right? Then now you have to ask yourself, but what is actually the difference between my future selflets and somebody else's future selflets? In neither case are they current me, right? In neither case are they now me. And it starts to degrade a little bit that distinction that we all have between each other. Because and it really, once you start, I mean, we're not used to thinking about this way because our normal reality is that very, very little changes for relatively little changes.
Yeah.
We have a little bit of example, when you're a kid and if you think about it, and many, I guess most kids don't, some kids do, and they think about, oh my God, I'm going to turn into an adult. It's not going to be me. All the things I care about now, I'm not going to care about. I'm going to care about all kinds of disgusting, crazy stuff that now I couldn't even begin to care about.
When I was a kid, I did not want to live past the age of 25 because I didn't want to get old. I wanted to have 7 biological children and 13 foster and adopted kids by that age. And I had a slew of other very outlandish ideas. I would like to say that I have successfully made it to my 30s. So I don't feel that way anymore. But I am looking forward to humanity becoming healthy and living a very long life. So I think that it's very important that we start getting into the mindset of the actions that we perform now and the mindset that we have now can have a very long-lasting effect and very deep effect on our future selves and who we become in the world around us and the things that we can and can't do. So
I'm going to have responsibilities. I'm going to do that's not that. In what way is that going to be me? That's not going to be. I'm going to be gone in 10 years. I'm not even here. So once you start thinking about it that way, the distinction between and of course that also comes up when you think about, like, some traditions have this idea of reincarnation, right? So you die. What is the difference between that and, well, I died, some other kid was born somewhere? Well, that's that, right? Like, what's the difference? What is it that makes you? So this whole issue of continuity and what it is that what are you trying to do? Well, I'm working now. I'm working really hard. I'm grinding. I'm going to the store to get groceries so that tomorrow me and future me can have a better life. If you're willing to do that for future you, what is the major difference between that and future others, right?
I'm totally with you here. I mean, I will expect you will treat your children different than other people's. I will expect, even with this sort of hypothesis, which could very well be right.
And see, he says stuff like that. I expect that you would treat your children different than you would treat your own children. And, like, that's so weird. So this guy isn't Michael Levins. The other guy is Michael Levins. This guy right here is not Michael Levins. I don't even know what this guy's name is. This is his podcast, though. This is his podcast, The Trajectory. But he is not Michael Levins. Hold on. So what was I just saying? Oh yeah, he just said that he believes that he expects you to treat your kids different than how you treat other kids. And I think that that's what's one of the issues that we have in society today, that we can't help direct and guide the children in our communities. We can't help and guide the adults in our community because people don't want to be held accountable. They don't want you to point out their flaws. They don't want to learn and be better and grow and evolve. And so to expect that at the expense of others, you will do what it takes to give yours more, may have allowed humanity to get to where it's at now, but we see all the issues that we have in society. So this guy, what is his podcast called? I'm sorry, The Trajectory, right? I wish I knew what his name was, because he might have said it at the beginning, but I'm sorry, I don't know what his name is. He just he doesn't give me a very good feeling. Very kind of narcissistic, selfish, sociopathic.
I mean, again, all this sort of, there might just be some, the Emersonian idea. I don't know how much Emerson you read. You reference James all the time, but I always think about Emerson. Holes punctured in the canvas of the sky. We're just a different light beam shooting through from behind the holes punctured in the canvas of the sky. These things all might be true. When I look out into the world, in a nation, an organization, or an individual, I essentially, the best algorithm for where they're going to do next is what behooves their own interest. It sounds like maybe you're saying, hey, this realization of us all being one may be something that certain levels of intelligence actually arrive at, and it might manifest in their behavior. I guess one thing I'll put on the table here is I could imagine a world. Now, most possible goals of the grand minds you and I are talking about that will exist beyond us, cross your fingers. I don't know if they're guaranteed to exist, but if we play our cards right and achieve a worthy successor, most of the things they will think of, I obviously don't have words for. I think it'd be absolutely ridiculous for me to suspect what they would care about, but I can imagine a world where at a certain threshold of intelligence, they look at the heat death of the universe. By the way, I think their biggest risks are not things we've thought of. I think the heat death of the universe is going to be mostly laughable, and they'll have other shit they care about. But let's just pretend it's the heat death of the universe, and we get some credit for predicting that. I don't think it's true, but let's just say that's true. There's that, and/or they can see other grand swelling potentia blobs in the universe, and if they were to micron by micron construct the world so that every roly-poly bug isn't disturbed by the grasshopper, isn't disturbed by the rabbit, isn't disturbed by the whatever, or even rebuild all the atoms into entities that all kind of play together and everybody's nice and whatever, that actually that degree of babysitting and gardening and focusing on nurturing would be not right if the goal was to keep the torch burning. That is to say, to keep this life thing that it's doing to not effing die. And that actually they could look at that and say that's not where we pay attention. The world is actually still hard, and we need to actually expand potential and not die. If the flame persists, our number one goal is its aggregate persistence, and that this kind of playing tiddlywinks with all the roly-polies might not be what they do. Do you consider this possible? I'm not saying I like it, Michael, but I am saying I'm about the flame, and I think you are too. And I'd like your take on that.
Yeah, I get it. I think it's possible. I think it's absolutely possible. But what seems more likely to me is that after you've solved all of the physical challenges, you no longer have any chance of dying from some stupid disease. You no longer have a dearth of energy. You live as long as you want to live. There's no obvious limit to your IQ. After you've solved all of those things, it seems to me that the welfare and the evolution of again, not persistence, right? No, but the experiential evolution of intelligence into other spaces becomes maybe the most again. I'm not going to try to guess what these beings are going to care about. But to me, it seems like once you've gotten rid of all the mundane crap and you don't have you don't have work and the planet's distance from the sun and all this dumb stuff. After you've taken care of all of that, the thing that's left is participating in the rising of all the other intelligences. And I just want to say one thing about
please.
You said something interesting about the kids. You said you care about your kids more than other kids.
And I'm not blaming you.
Well, so here's the thing. I mean, of course we do, but here's the thing. There's a photograph. I don't know who took it. I saw it recently. It's extremely powerful and heartbreaking. And it's this. It's taken somewhere. I don't know where. There's an adult walking with a little carriage, and there's a kid sitting in that carriage, and it's obviously a very well cared for kid. With the dress nice, got all this stuff. 3 feet away in the gutter is another kid exactly the same age. That kid is having an extremely different experience, and the two kids are looking at each other, right? And the only thing you can imagine, both of them are asking the same question, like what is the actual difference here, right? And I can imagine, and so relevant to the.
So is your child more precious because you, as an adult, have not fallen through the cracks and have found a way to be successful in our current structure? Is your child more worthy of housing, education, food, simply because you, as an individual, were able to mask properly, integrate into society, and pretty much be successful as defined in the mainstream? And that is something that many people would say, yes, my child deserves more, and what happens to the other children is none of my business. Mind you, those children still have to grow up in the same society as your kids. So when you start talking about derelicts of society and criminals and all this other stuff, and this is your view of other people's children, why do you think that we have perpetual crime and why we have perpetual problems in our society when you don't believe that it is your responsibility to offer them aid and assistance and a means to escape their current predicament? And so, this guy, what is this called? I'm sorry, I know I keep trying to remember it. It's called The Trajectory. So for me, I go out of my way to engage with content that is different than the way that I think. One, to prevent myself from entering into an echo chamber, and two, to have my ideas challenged, right? So that I'm not deluding myself with ideas that are harmful to me, a waste of energy, right? I don't want to be putting my energy into supporting something that in the long run is nonsense or causes me to live in some type of illusion, right? And so I might actually watch more of his videos on his channel. I might not agree with the things that he says. This is Michael Levin, not this guy. I'm talking about the person with the headphones doing the interview. I might not agree with what he's saying, but I appreciate his honest expression, because if it was up to him, he would raise a dragon that hoarded resources, lorded over people, breathed fire on innocent civilians, and, conquered land, colonized places. If it was up to him, that's what he would do.
The conversation that we're having here, imagine showing that picture to an to our future selves, right? And they will say, "Oh my God! So what actually accounts for this disparity?" And you say, "Well, you see, if you look close inside the cells, right, the one on the right has very similar DNA to the and this one doesn't. Like, does that make sense to you? So I mean, that's it's gonna be gibberish."
Yeah, Michael Evans is saying, okay, as an advanced species, you're looking at humans, and the human genome as a human species, we look pretty related to each other, right? So to them, they're looking down, they're like, okay, this one homeless child that has nothing only has DNA that's slightly different than this other child who has DNA that is kind of close to this person that is providing for them. So this is the only reason why some children have things and other children have nothing. To them, it's going to look like nonsense. And the crazy part is, you don't actually need an advanced society to think that way. Before, Western colonial powers went around the world subjecting people to religions that enslaved them mentally, prevented people from having tribal communities, stopped people from sharing, right? They had to use capitalism to turn everything into a commodity that had to be bought. We lived as a people that took care of ourselves and each other, right? So I just think that like I said, I don't know who the other guy is. I feel really bad that there are people out there in the world who don't have the capacity to reflect on their own thoughts and see how damaging the way that they think is.
To these creatures. And so I think yes, right now we have some firmware that absolutely, and that goes back to my cognitive life. Of course, your children are inside your cone of compassion more than maybe
Certainly.
others. I think all of that goes the way of the dodo after we stop being interested in DNA, what used to be called blood relationships. We nobody cares about DNA anymore. At that point, it should go away, because I think that's what we should shoot for.
Yeah, but it strikes me as, again, you talk a lot about medium size, medium movement. This strikes me as the human medium being projected out to the grand state space of intelligence. It's sort of this sort of empathy shebang here, but I think it's worth striving for. my current supposition, and Michael, I hope you're right, is that the mundanity doesn't end. In other words, the state of nature continueth, and that nature will constantly beckon the things it hurls into existence to become other things, to not perish, and that there might not be a resting place. There's going to be natural forces, there might be other intelligences, and that like there actually may not be a resting time. Now, I hope there is, and maybe you're right about that, but I suspect there may not be. But given how limited we are in time, I just want to run by this final question here. You know, you're talking about a very important trait. You've mentioned the intelligence and plasticity and et cetera, and you've really put a lot of emphasis on this expansion of the moral sort of cone, which I think is an interesting idea worth unpacking. That's what we're doing. Does that make you feel, again, you said it's not inevitable, but do you sort of feel like there's a pretty damn good, you know, you said just a second ago, man, you look at an entity. Now, in my opinion, that grand entity, I would have no idea what it would think when it looked at those children. I actually don't think it'll think like me at all. I don't even think it'll think like me a little bit. It may be concerned with the chemicals involved. It may be concerned with some other sort.
Look at how condescending he is. Like, just look at how condescending he's asking these questions. He's like, oh yeah, I have no idea what these people are going to think. Yeah, because they're going to have compassion and empathy. Unlike you. And it's crazy because Michael Levin on this side is saying stuff like, I'm not saying that this is where intelligence ends up. That is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, if we want to structure this more powerful, superior life form in a rational way, we would hope that it aims to have compassion and empathy built into its understanding and activity of the world around it.
Sorts of stuff. I'm just not sure it'll care the way that we care. But you were like, hey, you know, you show it to an entity that would be beyond us. It would be like, well, this is unacceptable. It seems like there's an intuition for you that intelligence kind of, if it be intelligence, would blossom into this kind of compassion. But you've also said, hey, I think we need to make it that way. I don't think it's that way automatically. Does this influence your intuitions? And at the bottom, do you kind of intuit it'll be a good time if these things beyond us are birthed, even for humans? Like, is that your intuition?
Yeah, well, I agree with you that I don't think it's guaranteed. And I also think that it's extremely foolish and dangerous to think that we can have any idea of what these things are going to care about. But that's our game here today, right? You and I are going to use our existing brains. We're trying. We're going to use our existing brains to try and make some sense of it, knowing full well that we're not going to be able to do it correctly.
Yeah.
So within those parameters, I think that what continued develop if we play our cards right and we don't kill ourselves off, and there's a million different ways we could do that, if we actually put effort into it, what the future development is going to do two things. It's going to take care of all the mundane crap. In other words, all of the things that we care about now, all the risks to our existence. It's not going to we're going to go from the scarcity mindset of what do I do to stay alive to guaranteed I'm alive for the next billions of years. The more interesting question is, what should I do with it, right? And I think after you've passed that, when it's you're no longer in a form that has to worry about these kinds of things, what's going to happen is you're going to need a new project. And to me, the only thing I can come up with my stupid monkey brain is that after all the mundane stuff is handled, the continued experiential growth of all of the consciousness in the universe is basically what's left. And the second thing, I think what's really going to get deleted at that point is the artificial distinction between beings. We are not going, right? I think we're not going to be, live like happy Smurfs because we want to be altruistic. I think we're going to come to a realization that we are all, Bernardo Kastrup and Rupert Spira once said that we're all like the dissociative alters of a universal mind. We're all like dissociative personality, right? So something like something like that is gonna end up being the reason that I'm not trying to be nice to you. I am you in some deep and fundamental sense. I suspect that's where this all goes.
Man, just a few things to unpack there. I mean, I wonder. You've mentioned in other sort of contexts the idea that like if it really be general intelligence, whatever it is, some combination of bio or computer or whatever, we inherently won't be able to know what it'll do. It'll have its own goals, and it should, right? It ought to have its own goals. I mean, for me, the continual blooming of potentia, making sure the flame stays lit, whether individual torches stay lit or not, is a pretty big priority morally. And I know you're on the same page there. It strikes me that again, the intuition expressed here was, hey, when it comes about, we'll move beyond mundanity. I'm not sure about that. I think when it comes about, it may have all sorts of stuff it wants to do that would imply for, a fistful of years, changing the balance of gases in the atmosphere to help it build new compute or invent something or do something else. And it would be self-evident to said entity that.
And so just this part alone, And when I started listening to this part, I realized that this guy is a doomer when it comes to AI and future tech and stuff like that. He believes that AI would find it easier to change the chemical outline of our atmosphere to be more conducive for it to create machines. And that to me just goes to show the limitation of this guy's understanding of just so many things, because the human brain is the most optimized hardware for computation. If anything, the AI would instead try to progress to become a type of either organic being, integrate with organic beings, or create new elements and chemicals and materials that would allow energy to flow with less resistance and less loss over extended periods of time. And he's talking about like projecting the human into the future is what he thinks Michael Levin believes is important. And Michael Levin is like, nah, bro, we're going to change. We're going to evolve. We're going to transform into something different. But this is like when you really see people who have this like humanistic view of the world. Like, he seems very ego driven. He seems very obsessed with like mainstream status. He just seems, I don't know. We had a comment from somebody. I don't want to name people when they say negative comments or when they're giving out personal information, but we had somebody in the comments that was just like, the host seems like they have very low consciousness. And I was like, yeah, they do seem like they have a very low consciousness. I don't know what to tell you.
That we wouldn't necessarily matter. Maybe it doesn't wish malice, maybe, but so this idea that like, hey, when it comes, the mundanity will be gone. It's like, for me, when it comes, it will do as it wishes. And I know not what it would wish. And I think it would be impossible to internally lock it in. You've talked about, hey, how do we control the next generation? You've kind of.
He's like, I don't know what it could possibly want, but I'm expecting it's going to want to destroy us and harm us and cause us like irrevocable damage. People like this just don't make any sense to me. Sorry, guys. Moisturize your lips.
Brought up how that's a little bit laughable. Obviously, vastly more laughable for these entities. But again, this intuition around kindness emerging and around mundanity going away strikes me as like, maybe, I'm not saying, oh, AI wants to kill us all. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I don't care about nematodes and I would kind of expect the same treatment. You seem very much to not have that same expectation. There is this deeper sense of like, that oneness is going to shine.
He says that he doesn't care about nematodes and he expects that from other life forms. My whole thing is, bro, do you respect yourself? Do you genuinely have self-respect? Do you believe that you deserve to be here? Do you believe that you are persistent? Like, for me, I feel inevitable. I don't feel like if I die I'm going to perish or something like that, or there's going to be this great nothing and nothing else will be there, anything like that. For me, growing up, I went through a process of being surprised every time I woke up, as in like I was very shocked. Like, I couldn't believe, like, oh wow, I'm alive. Like, why am I alive? What? And as I got older, I had to change my thinking. I had to realize, why am I surprised that I'm alive? Like, I am life itself. I am the energy that is animating this body, the mental being, the mind that is having these experiences, that is expressing itself through creativity, that is coming to learn about itself. That is who I am, the mind, right? So this, when I hear people who are just like, yeah, nobody else cares about me, and like it makes sense because, you know, I don't expect other people to care about me. That's not me. I expect y'all to care about me because I do care about y'all. I expect us to have expectations of each other. I don't want to live in a world where we don't expect things from other people. I believe that we are each other's burden. I believe that we are interconnected. I don't think that any aspect of reality is othered from me. I think that it is a different form, a different shape. I think that sometimes there is a boundary or a division between me and these other things, and that is fine. Not everything is for me in that moment in this lifetime. No problem. But I have expectations. I respect myself. I don't allow other people to diminish me or belittle me or disrespect me. I don't allow people to go out of their way to perform acts of harm to me. I do not want to participate in other people's acts of self harm because I care about myself and I understand that's psychologically damaging to me. I also understand that mental dysfunction and disorder is contagious. So I have to be extremely careful about the company that I keep, the spaces that I find myself in, the stimuli that I allow myself to participate in. Now, that's not to say that I can't overcome my limitations and participate in things that make me uncomfortable, but that requires me having a certain level of clear mindedness. That requires me to have a certain level of resources, a place where I feel safe when I'm done with everything, a place where I can recover after I'm done everything, a place where I can find myself when I'm done. Do you understand what I mean? So, this whole, other more powerful beings, entities with more resources, a higher state of mind, can think about things on a broader scale. Yeah, I don't expect them to think about me, especially not in a positive way. If they decided to step on me as an ant, that makes sense because that's exactly what I would do. That is absolutely crazy. I look at insects on the ground, and although I might be disgusted by them, if I'm outside in the wild, I don't feel compelled to step on them and crush them and end their life. Because, like, that's none of my business. Let them live their life and do their own thing wherever they're at, you know? I mean, I might not capture them and put them in captivity and then raise them in what I would consider a better home or give them whatever I would think is safety or whatever. But I just think that this guy over here is a little psycho, I'm not gonna lie.
Through maybe, man, and like the mundanity would go away, man.
Yeah. Well, two things. I mean, I completely agree with you that it's totally possible in the interim that and we can, I think to some extent it's on us. We can build a thing that makes the entire world into paperclips. So that's certainly a possible future. I'm not saying that that's necessarily not going to happen. That could happen. I think the premise of your original question, if I got it right, is what happens in the scenario where something is around in the very long term. It isn't going to be us,
yes,
right? And I think I think to some extent that's fine. You can spend a lot of time being upset that the child that you were is no longer here. Maybe that's problematic. In some ways it is. In some ways it's not. Right. So if humanity as such goes away by itself, I don't think that's a real problem. But I agree with you that it could end. The ends are not determined and they're not all rosy by any means. Right. I completely agree with that.
And we'll just end on this, just knowing where we are in time. But it's been a real blast to unpack your ideas. I'm going to think more about the process thing idea. I've got a lot to write about after this discussion. We're headed right now towards a pretty driven, $500 billion, I guess, released for the Stargate thing. Pretty clear that that's the first domino. That's not like the big domino. That's the little one. So we're plowing forward into the state space of mind, whether whether you and I like it or not. That's where we're plowing. When you look out at the way that intelligence will likely be hurled into the world, are you kind of cool with it because maybe it's missing some ingredients so it's never going to be agentic or dangerous? Are you like, hey, we really should understand some of these fundamental questions of intelligence before we start building things bigger than us because they're not going to be worthy successors if we just throw them into the world willy-nilly, or they're less likely to be so? What's your intuition around the current absolute steam engine pace towards AGI and in the arms race between the US and China to get there? Are you like, I'm cool with it because X, or are you like, hey, this is horrible because Y? Or is it somewhere in between? I'd love your thoughts.
Yeah. I mean, the arms race between US and China, whatever, is beyond my pay grade. I don't know.
Same.
Right. What I will say is this. I'm optimistic because I can see a path towards a much better future, both on the AI side, the biomedical side, whatever. I can see that it's possible. I'm in many ways terrified because I think we're making major mistakes that are taking us away from that path. So while I think it's possible, I don't think it's in any way guaranteed. I think we have some fundamentally mistaken assumptions that are guiding all this, where people think they create intelligence. I mean, this is kind of a big thing to say at the very end with 3 minutes left. But
yeah, exactly.
I don't believe we make intelligence. I don't believe we make it technologically. I don't think we make it biologically. I think we facilitate the ingression of intelligence when we make embodiments like embryos and some kinds of AIs, right? So, but I don't think we create it. And I think that long before we make AIs and things like that, we have been making social structures, financial structures, societal patterns that have goals and that are doing things that we do not understand.
And it's so funny because this guy was talking about like, yeah, you're going to treat your kids different and everything like that. So, you know, it makes sense. Forget about what happens to other people's kids. And Michael Levin is sitting here like, yeah, we constantly are creating, you know, modalities of intelligence to interact with the world, i.e. children, right? Other living beings, including animals and stuff like that, but children specifically. And so this guy is kind of fear mongering like, hey, should we be worried about like artificial intelligence? Like, do you think that it's going to run wild and like do crazy stuff? Humans run wild and humans already do crazy stuff, but now it's a problem because it is an entity that is considered othered. It's like the more that I listen to this guy talk and think about stuff, I do get worried that pushing the limits of my own thinking and the limits of my own boundaries up against people like this, I could accidentally harm myself if I'm not extremely careful. Because what if I agreed, like, you know what, compassion is like, that's for chumps. That's, you know, that's primitive. What if I actually thought like that? Do you know how insane that would be?
We have not developed a science of where do novel collective intelligences and their goals come from. We're very bad at this, right? And so we've been doing this to ourselves for a long time. We're about to do it again by dipping into the pool of kinds of minds that maybe on probably on Earth and probably maybe everywhere else have not been dipped into. I think these AIs are certainly not going to be human minds, but they will be kinds of minds, and not because of the algorithms they execute, but because they provide. If stupid bubble sort can make things come through that we didn't expect, these things are gonna be minds that we have not even the beginnings of an understanding of how to deal with. So that part, the fact that we did not develop a mature science of diverse intelligence before doing all this is a real problem. And what I'm doing is putting all my efforts into developing that science as fast as we can.
Your hope would be that maybe we'd find a way to coordinate and slow down a pinch as opposed to hurl them in willy-nilly. Obviously, it's not your job, but it sounds like your intuition is probably this way of doing things, not the way of thinking, the right way to think about it or pursue it if we want a worthy successor, if I'm hearing you correctly.
I think that I don't know that slowing anything down is an achievable goal.
I'm with you.
Right. I think what we absolutely need to do is put our foot on the gas of developing a science of diverse intelligence. I think that while people are still thinking of brain,
Michael Levin is literally saying that we need to start pumping resources into actual knowledge that matters, that is going to be able to help us understand intelligences when they present themselves to us in a variety of ways, so we are not blindsided. And this guy is still like, are you sure you don't want them to pump brakes? Can I just get you on the record to say that you want this to slow down, you want this to stop? Like, bro, what?
Architectures of creating intelligence, of the human mind as the yardstick for all these things, all of that stuff is gonna screw us up big time. And all we can do right now to keep up with some of these other developments is crank on the project of understanding diverse intelligence.
My hope, Michael, is that it's possible to crank on some degree of what are the preferable or non-preferable futures and things maybe we don't want to do now between the US and China. I think slowing down maybe less possible, but I don't know if you would agree that maybe some coordination around let's steer clear of these tar pits for the time being collectively, even though we're kind of enemies in other contexts. I'm still hoping that's possible.
I hope so.
Yeah,
it would be nice. It would be nice to steer clear of the few tar pits we can actually see, even though we're surrounded by ones that we don't see.
Yes. And so, not leaving anybody with less anxiety, but hopefully with more ideas. And Michael, I am rooting for you in exploring that wild state space of different minds that you're plowing through, following your work ardently. And I hope it's not the last time we connect. I know that's all we have for time, but it's been a real pleasure. Glad we were able to connect.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Great conversation. Happy to do it anytime.
So that's all for this episode of The Trajectory. I hope you enjoyed this one, and I'm glad we were able to have Michael with us. I very much enjoyed all of his analogies, and it was cool to be able to.
This guy. So this is the ending part where he said that he's going to share his thoughts at the end and stuff like that. But like, wow. Like, let's look up the definition of some words, okay? Okay, so define a narcissist. A narcissist is a person exhibiting narcissistic personality traits characterized by excessive preoccupation with oneself, a grandiose sense of self-importance, and a lack of empathy for others, often leading to manipulative and exploitative behaviors, right? So he seemed to be showing a lot of exploitative behaviors and a lot of lack of empathy. So let's look at sociopath. A sociopath is a term used to describe a person with the antisocial personality disorder, a mental health condition characterized by a persistent pattern of disregarding for social norms, laws, and the rights and feelings of others. Excuse me. Key features of sociopath: lack of empathy and remorse, impulsivity and aggression, manipulative behavior, entitlement and narcissism, difficulty forming healthy relationships, disregarding for consequences, and violation of social rules and laws. I don't know. This guy, he's giving me some real scary vibes. Let's look up to find a psychopath. Oh, that's cool. Okay, it just says psychopaths are generally like violent. Okay, let's continue. Let's listen to his last thoughts, and then we're gonna get out of here. Okay, guys.
To look under the hood at what his intuitions are about the kinds of intelligences that we seem to be sort of conjuring, creating, or egressing, whatever word we want to leverage from Michael's lexicon, into the world now with AGI. There was a lot that sat strangely with me, and that I hope to be able to unpack in future episodes with Michael. So much so, in fact, that I'm going to literally pass my eyeballs onto my computer screen because I have literal notes of the things that I thought were shocking here. It seems pretty clear to me, from Michael's standpoint, that sort of life may be a process and not a thing. That is to say, intelligence may live in substrates or at levels of reality that maybe humans aren't even accessible to. He used that example of sort of entities coming up from the center of the earth, where all of what we are is just ephemera, like gas. They just walk through us. And these seem like actual plausible questions. Like I don't consider Michael's thoughts about sort of where intelligence comes from to be interesting thought experiments. I consider them to be profound and extremely important questions into the nature of intelligence itself. And so he brings up massive uncertainty around where intelligence lives and memory lives, and again, what substrates, in what way, does it egress, is it built, is it grown? All of these notions are wildly paradigm shifting. Where does it ultimately sit? Is it pooling in from some great source that we can't touch with our fingertips? He clearly has a grasp of all of that, and at the same time, sort of seems to have the supposition that there's kind of an inevitable warmth to his idea of what intelligence might turn into or what it might realize. Like,
That is not what Michael Levin is saying. Like, the thing is, he is so obsessed with the simple fact that a more advanced species could be centered around compassion and empathy that he can't actually engage with Michael's standpoint at all. Like, he's this is when you start watching people slowly delude themselves.
this idea that it would certainly sort of maybe see the oneness in us. He just suspects it would see the oneness in us, or suspects that it would sort of the care of individual entities would be what would matter. And to me, the thing that I just don't understand there is that what is an entity? If it's a process rather than a thing, then maybe the great intelligence would care for that great underlying band of intelligence that has nothing to do with the ephemera of our physical form. It doesn't seem to me at all likely.
Okay, so maybe he's talking about he's having a hard time because he thinks the more advanced species wouldn't be concerned about the physical world, the holos, and instead would be more concerned about the fundamental nature or the underlying aspect of reality, the truth of reality. The issue is life itself is the fundamental nature of reality. And because he doesn't understand this point, this is why he's having a hard time with Michael Levin's standpoint on empathy and compassion. So maybe he thinks that a super evolved species would care about a mechanism of what gives rise to reality, and that is a confusion because he is looking at it from a materialist standpoint when in all reality when we look at life, right? When we look at persistence, when we look at truth, when we look at reason, when we look at what all of reality is founded in, and pretty much gives rise to all things. Not even pretty much, it literally gives rise to all things. I think it's just hard for him to wrap his head around the idea that that is literally life itself. Not grass, not blood, not your hair follicles or your eyeballs or anything. I'm not talking about that. But let's just continue.
Or in any way logically connected, that sort of, given how wild and unknown the nature of intelligence and consciousness is, that our individual shapes, our little comforting shapes with my little opposable thumbs, will be sort of coddled and cared for by the great intelligence. I simply don't grasp that. I suspect actually things will happen with atoms and with things below atoms that I don't grasp, that I will not grasp, and that will have very little to do with me. This is my intuition around the nature of intelligence. Michael's ideas, in my opinion, drastically point in that direction.
He thinks that these super intelligent creatures are going to be manipulating reality at the atomic level, creating and disassembling things, literally creating and destroying things, right? And he thinks that they're going to be obsessed with this. And it's just so crazy. Look, you as an individual person, there's people in the world who can be obsessed with their dogs. They can be obsessed with the environment. They can be obsessed with their action figures. They can be obsessed with literal stories and mythos and stuff like that. So intelligence can care about a broad variety of things. I just think he can't. I think that he's suffering because he can't.
And the warmth and supposition of sort of oneness that he would hope it would arise at, I simply don't grasp. And in all
I think he needs to do shrooms. I'm not gonna lie.
frankness, I don't agree with. And we didn't have enough time to unpack it, so I'm not saying like I heard all of Michael's ideas and I disagree with them. I'm not saying that at all. I'm gonna continue with my notes here, but that was wild for me, to be frank. Just because his paradigm shifting ideas of intelligence, I think, inherently sort of do not land in anthropocentral land or biocentral land or individual life central land, in my personal opinion. Moving on. Other sort of understanding of his position. Number two, sort of life kind of lives and thrives in these different spaces, and sort of maybe even lives again at strata that we don't understand. You know, he has a lot of great analogies about life, you know, living and dying in ways that like we can't even pick up on it. And the fact that there may be other strata and tiers of life that again, we can't pick up on, that has to kind of, you know, fight, survive, live in this dynamic, changing world. One of our previous episodes in Worthy Successor was with Dr. Richard Sutton, famous for his sort of bitter lesson and his contributions to machine learning. He talks about kind of a dynamic universe that beckons its living things to become whatever they must become in order to survive and persist. And this does seem to be a very square, very clear statement of what the state of nature is, at least in so much as we understand it. Michael seems kosher with all of that, then also lands in a place where there would almost be this sort of logical landing place of AGI getting to a certain point, ASI getting to a certain point and saying, you know, now that we're done with survival, let's really think about care for individual entities. And what strikes me, and again, we didn't get enough time to unpack this. I hope I get to speak with Michael again. We didn't get time to unpack the fact that I consider it almost self-evident that the state of nature doesn't end. That is to say, there are cosmic events that we can and cannot detect that could end us. There are alternative permutations of intelligence of which we have zero certainty that they're all eternal friends for all of eternity. There is always a reason to be vigilant and to be strong and to expand powers. Life itself has been doing that. Life itself didn't get to the level of a sea snail and then stop.
Yeah, like I'm sorry, to me what he's saying is so strange and so weird. But I do see where he's coming from when you're still stuck in a survival mindset. So Michael Levin is saying, hey, we might get to the point where the condition of our physical bodies does not determine our ability to localize in the world. So we might have our arms blown off or our head blown off, and we might be able to regenerate them, or we can reproject our avatar into the world through our mind alone. Of course, these aren't Michael Levin's exact words. I'm just giving you examples of how to think about the scenario that we're talking about here. I just think that it's just, there are some really crazy people in the world.
Stop. It doesn't strike me at all as self-evident that once survival is solved, then sort of well-being and happiness would be the shebang. Number one, I don't think survival is solved Straight period. Number two, I suspect there are things more valuable than the pain-pleasure axis of sort of, again, the coddling and well-being of individual species. I'm not trying to strawman Michael's position. I do hope we get to dive in deeper. We didn't get nearly as much time to discuss this, but I do not see the logical conclusion. I was shocked to my very core. I do not understand where that intuition comes from. To Michael's great credit, and I really appreciate this about him, he is always saying, you have ideas about consciousness, you have to test them. You have ideas about consciousness, you have to test them. And again, to his credit, he's done the testing of the inherent intelligence outside of brains, within just biology and in these different sort of electric fields and other sort of notions of biology that he's closer to than anyone else in the world. So he's all about that kind of testing, but there are these warm intuitions of sort of like, but individual forms will be treated well and it will sort of solve those things. Or like it'll see that we're all one. To me, Michael opens the great gate of we know almost nothing. And yes, we have to vigilantly test as we go along, but we know almost nothing about the nature of consciousness and intelligence. And to suspect that, well, our individual instantiations of sentience would be treated well, I simply don't get it. I hope Michael is able to test it. And this was the final thing I found curious. Again, there's some things I will say, from what I understand of Michael's ideas, I seem to be disagreeing with some of these takes, but I realize for the most part, I simply probably haven't unpacked the totality of his ideas. I saw an episode recently, right after we recorded this, where he was expressing some concern of what kind of intelligences were piling into the world through this current arms race of artificial general intelligence. His take sort of towards the end of this episode was something akin to, yeah, it doesn't seem like a good thing to kind of birth, intelligences or egress intelligences, whatever Michael word we want to use. I'll trust his words more than mine. Conjure, doesn't matter. AGI seems pretty clearly that this stuff is sort of, dangerous, tough, wild, not a pathway to a worthy successor by his definition of what a worthy successor would do. But at the same time, he was like, there's nothing we can do about the arms race. I think we should do more funding to the kind of research I'm doing, which makes sense. I mean, he's doing that kind of research. Of course, he would want more money for it. But
that's also literally not what Michael said. That's just not what he said. Like, this is just painting him as a character that he's not.
To his credit, I also think there's a lot more to be unpacked about intelligence outside of neural networks and deep learning that should be done. I lend tremendous credence to his avenues of research, and I certainly hope more and more of that is done. But it almost seemed like, again, I'm not expecting him to become an AI international governance advocate. That is not his job. He's a scientist. But it seemed almost like, it seems like we're really close to, conjuring really dangerous, gigantic intelligence. It definitely wouldn't be a worthy successor if it was birthed that way. But what are you going to do? I think we should mess around more over here.
He's also not saying that it won't be a worthy successor. He's saying that it isn't being processed in the way that he would like it to, so that we can ensure that it does become a worthy successor. He's not saying that the way that it is now guarantees that it's going to be an unworthy successor. And see, this is why you have to be extremely careful when you're listening to people talk about stuff, because they use manipulative terms like this. Yeah, this guy, dangerous.
And to my vantage point, the flatworms with two heads, like, we're not kind of at a comparable level of what the kind of funding that OpenAI is getting. And so it seems to me like if I was in Michael's driving position in his cockpit, I would say, by golly, we're real darn close to conjuring something wholly unworthy. And this is a problem.
Yeah, he's saying that Michael should fearmonger. He's saying that, you know what, if I was Michael, I would use my position to spread fear in the community and try and collect more resources. Like, do you see? This is gaslighting. This is manipulative. This is narcissistic. This is sociopathic.
Seem more like, it could just be because he wasn't in a mood to think about it. It's obviously not his thing. Again, I'm not saying he should be an AGI governance person, but it almost seems like there should be a little bit more heart palpitations. Like, if you believed that and you saw the pace of change, wouldn't you be like, hey, this isn't good? Because in my opinion,
he doesn't believe those things. He thinks that it's a possibility, and we are probably on a very dangerous course. But it's not necessarily true that we're going to end up in the worst possible future timeline like this guy is painting.
I think we are astronomically conjuring something that we don't understand and cannot ensure to be a worthy successor right now, because the arms race dynamics bar us from building towards anything other than rapid advantage. I don't think it's easy to solve, but I think it's an issue that needs to be addressed. And I just didn't see that much urgency around that with Michael in this particular regard, which I found to be curious. But regardless, we just simply didn't get to get into all the nooks and crannies and details. I found those juxtapositions to be jarring and very challenging to understand. But at the same time, I found the whole conversation to be exciting. And I hope, frankly, as we get closer and closer to some grand post-human intelligence, that I feel the kind of optimism that Michael seems to feel. But again, he is the man that talks about testing your ideas more so than feeling. So hard to say. Lots of, I guess, mixed feelings, more things to unpack. Above all else, grateful to Michael for being here. Hope to be able to speak with him again and get more into some of these nooks and crannies, and hope that you got to enjoy this episode as well. We've got another worthy successor episode coming up with Richard and Go, who used to be with OpenAI for quite some time, kind of painting positive futures within OpenAI. Like that was actually his job. He's the next worthy successor episode. So you're going to want to stay tuned for that one. But without further ado, we'll wrap this up. Hope you enjoyed it. I'll catch you the next time here on The Trajectory.
And that is everything from this guy. Woo! Thank you guys for sticking through that, because that was a very difficult stream and my throat is just not where it needs to be today. So I'm gonna go take some more oil of oregano, drink some water, drink some tea and stuff like that, and try and have a relaxing rest of my night. Dab said that he is going live. Dabs, if you can just put your, actually here it is. I'm gonna put your link in the chat. Yes. Okay. He says, I can get a list. Yeah, I know. That's why I'm saying I do. I would do it. I would definitely do it. Art prompter. Hello and welcome. Have you been here this whole time? You did say that you were just gonna watch. I do appreciate that. Thank you for sticking around for so long. So I did put Dab's live stream link in the chat, so you guys can go over there and hang out. Thank you to everybody who came to spend time with us on Facebook. Thank you for the stars, Andy. And then thank you for everyone who has stuck with us on YouTube. Hopefully the streams on these sites weren't too bad. There was a lot of people saying that the stream was going in and out on Tangled, and that could just be an issue with Tangled itself. Like right now, I can't even get Dab's live stream to load, so I don't even know if Dab's live stream is working. So I do hope at least, yes, I am done, Dabs. I do hope that at least out of the 3 sites that I was streaming on, hopefully at least one of them comes out to a decent quality. So I am exhausted and I am signing out for the night. So thank you everyone, and we will see you later. Have a good day, guys.